Welcome into a special edition of the Josh Hendrickson Show. I'm Neal McCready here in the Clark Ford Studios, joined, as you might expect, as you probably do expect by this point, Josh Hendrickson, the chair of economics at the University of Mississippi. Some people refer to that as Ole Miss. If you refer to it as just Mississippi, which is Associated Press form, it still makes people mad, including Ole Miss, which asked people not to do it, and the AP does it anyway. But that's another subject for another day. Today, we commemorate, kind of talk about the 250th birthday of the United States of America. It's the day before the U.S. plays a World Cup game against Turkey, is that you call it now? It's just Turkey, right?
I mean, we don't have to do this.
Do we have to change the name?
We don't have to do this. People have decided that we have to, adopt these different, it's
just Turkey.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
U.S. has already won its group.
Yep.
Going to advance to the group of 32 no matter what happens Thursday night. So it's just a party Thursday night. The whole country's been a party. I was telling Josh that I watched. Couldn't say I watched. I had it on and followed it along a little bit as I was doing other things. But the Chicago Cubs were in New York today to play the Mets. And the Norwegian soccer team apparently is in New York. And there were more Norwegian fans than there were Mets fans at the ballpark for a noon, 1 o'clock Eastern game. They were quite loud. They all probably left the stadium thinking Dansby Swanson is the Messi of Major League Baseball. He hit 2 home runs, grand slam, 3-run homer. Cubs beat the Mets 10-3, but it was jolting at first because I just kind of had it on and I wasn't watching. I was working on my mailbag for Rebels 24/7. And I was like, man, that is a rowdy crowd. For a noon game between the Mets and the Cubs, a couple of middling teams that are just sort of trying to find their way here in late June. And then I heard Jim Deshaies, the Cubs color guy, say that it was a lot of Norwegian fans out in right field, and they were enjoying themselves. They got quiet in about the 6th inning, and he said they went to get refreshments in mass, apparently. So they had a fun time at Citi Field in New York. Hopefully you guys will have a fun time with us. Josh, do you want me to talk about the guest, or do you have them memorized enough where you can do it?
Well, so, I guess the point of this is we thought that what we would do is do a little celebration, a little America 250, America maxing. Everybody should be celebrating America. It's a time to really just go over the top with it. And so, yeah, we've lined up some guests. I thought that would be a good way to do it, is get some perspectives from people that I know who, have interesting things to say, and who I think people would like to hear from. So I think that, it's a little bit different type of show than what we normally do, but yeah. I think it'll be worthwhile. I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be entertaining, and hopefully people get something out of it. And then, and they get a little bit different perspective. I know that, people come here for our perspective, but, there are other people who have valuable opinions. And I think that, it's worth showcasing some of those opinions, and especially in celebration of America. So
Josh has lined up 4 guests for us. We'll see. Hopefully I can work out the technical part of this. That's the part that I probably lose a little sleep over. Matthew Peterson will join us. He's currently the George Washington Fellow at the Claremont Institute's Center for the American Way of Life. He previously served as the Vice President of Education at the Claremont Institute. He was the founding editor of The American Mind. He was also the co-founder of a venture film called New Founding. The media assets that he built were acquired by Blaze Media, where he served as the editor-in-chief and as a member of the executive team. We'll also be joined by Scott Morris. He's a speaker and author, current fellow at the University of Mississippi's Declaration Center. He also served as the executive editor of the Oxford American. Alexander Salter will join us. He's the George G. Snyder Professor of Economics at Texas Tech and the Comparative Economics Research Fellow at Texas Tech's Free Market Institute. And last but not least, we'll be joined by Brian Cutzinger. He's an assistant professor of economics at Florida Atlantic. He's the Phil Smith Fellow at the Phil Smith Center for Free Enterprise, the current director of the American Institute for Economic Research's Sound Money Project, and also the associate editor of the academic journal Public Choice. I noticed you got no one from Louisiana Monroe, but I've learned to accept these slights overtime here on the Josh Hendrickson Show.
We kind of got bailed out a little bit because I went overboard and I asked a bunch of people, and originally a bunch of people agreed to do it. And then when we narrowed down a date, we kind of got lucky and had sort of the right amount of people willing to do it.
We're also going to talk about algae. I think it's very important to talk about green water.
Yeah. I mean, leading Democratic presidential candidate. Algae.
Yes. Algae right now has a 7-point lead on Gavin Newsom and a 13-point lead on the former vice president of our country. I read a sample of her book recently on McCready and Siskey. It's profound, Josh. It's really. Well, why do you think we'll while we wait for Mr. Peterson? Why do you think? And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious to get your perspective. You have never been in media per se. You've had things published, obviously, but I don't know that you've ever served the day as a reporter. Congratulations on that. Why do you think the media here, doing my math, 10 days before the 4th, is trying to make the whole reflecting pool algae thing out to be? I have two questions. Why do you think they're making this what it is? And why do you think Trump is almost giving them fuel by saying, yeah, there's been this sabotage and all of these things have happened? And when obviously he could, and he says there's a video of this, and he could just release the video, and that would, of course, make it go away, because if he could release the video showing the sabotage, then the media wouldn't be able to have such a field day. But at the end of the day, it's just water in a reflecting pool. Why are we doing this 10 days out?
Well, first of all, nothing's changed in the last 10 years. Like we're still doing the same things that we did before. I think part of the reason is one of the things that we kind of talk about a lot, which is that there are a lot of reporters nowadays who kind of rise quickly through the ranks just because newspapers are dead. And so people end up in positions where they haven't been reporting on stuff, where they don't know things that they really should know. We've seen this for the last 10 years where Donald Trump says he's going to do something. The people catch wind of it. They look at it. They say like, oh, this is way too much money, or this is not something a president should do, or like, why are we doing this? And then they come out, they criticize. It turns into a big ordeal. And then what happens is that other reporters come along and start actually looking into this, whatever the issue is. And then they find that well, actually all presidents do this, or actually there have been a number of attempts to do the exact same thing in the past and they just haven't been successful. And the hilarious thing about this is that you would think that the response would kind of be, oh, okay, well, we got that wrong or something. We apologize. But the response is always just to double down and take the opposite perspective. Like, no, actually the algae is good. And no, we're not upset about the money. We're upset that you killed the algae, right? This is
well, and anybody who owns a swimming pool, especially if you live in anything resembling a hot weather summer climate, ask me how I know. When our water pump died last year around the 4th of July, and we had to get a new salt system, it took 2 days for the algae to start to make its presence felt. It's hot. The water is still. This is not complicated. And then I don't know. They show the people out there cheering on the algae, and I don't really get that. No matter what you think of whoever the president is, to me, to say that you look foolish would be the understatement of all time. I mean, but I don't know. It's the irony right now, and I mentioned the Norway thing for a reason. I think it's the Germans. I'm not sure exactly whose soccer team is in Miami, but the Miami Heat had a draft party last night. They crashed it, turned it into a giant party. They went to a Marlins game the other day. I'm sure the Marlins people were like, what in the world do we do? There are people here. I mean, all these people are coming to the U.S. They're celebrating our country. They love it. I mean, they go to Chick-fil-A and they're like, this is incredible. They're stealing ranch not stealing. They're buying ranch and trying to sneak it back into their luggage. They love America, and yet And I think most Americans love America. And yet there's this desire by some to paint everything in this super negative light, as opposed to celebrating. We do a lot of sports here on MPW Digital. I don't even know what the sport equivalent is of the U.S. beating England in 1776, if you will, in the Revolutionary War. It's something along the lines of Iowa Wesleyan knocking off Texas. Now, with Texas having a $50 million payroll and Iowa Wesleyan just having some dudes who played at a high school in Iowa. I'm not sure you could pull it off a second time. Is that too dramatic?
No, I think that, well, I don't. I think that, well, in part, how does this all relate? I mean, we've sort of lost the sense. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of this whole show, is kind of that this would have been a normal thing to do, like in our childhood, right? Like this would have been a normal thing that people would have done. They'd have a show celebrating America. And that's part of the reason, right? Is that this whole thing, our whole set of circumstances, the way that we got here, all of that was done against all odds, right? It was completely, you think about the United States, the thing about the U.S. and the revolution was the United States benefited from a lot of things that were going on outside of the United States at the time, right? So you had all of these settlers in the colonies, and those settlers were in the colonies, and when they're in the colonies, King James comes to power. And King James comes to power, and he wants to be a monarch like the continental European monarchs. Like, he wants more power. He wants more authority. He wants to throw off some of the shackles of sort of English history. And the subsequent century of English history is really just, England going through a civil war, England, having the Glorious Revolution, right? So they get rid of, they get rid of one king, then they have Cromwell, then they get the restoration of the king, and then they have the Glorious Revolution. This is an entire century where they're preoccupied with these other things. And when they're preoccupied with these other things, in the meantime, these American colonies are kind of developing, but not only are they developing, they're developing via self-rule, because they're developing all on their own, where they're governing themselves, and they're governing themselves independent of any interference from England. It's not until you get to like the French and Indian Wars in the mid 1700s and the British victory that all of a sudden England becomes kind of convinced that, okay, well, North America kind of belongs to us now. We really have to govern it. And that's what starts to set the stage, because you had these colonies, right, who had developed this sense of self-rule for a century and kind of got used to that. And so now all of a sudden the English come along and they're like, hey, this is time to, like, we have to assert our authority. Like, these are our colonies. We have to start governing them as though they're our colonies. We really, and that is kind of the spark that really starts to ignite the revolution. And when you think about that, like, still the odds are entirely against the United States. And so the idea that we can go from that, like these upstart colonies, to all of a sudden defeating like the most powerful military in the world at the time and the biggest empire in the world at the time, and having this country. And then not only the military victories, but you look at things like the Declaration of Independence, you look at things like the Constitution, and this is a dramatic change, right? This is a dramatic change with all of history, is that you have all of these new, you have, this articulation of sort of how society should be governed and sort of how society should function. And it's just remarkable. And so when you get that remarkable change, that's something worthy of celebrating, and it's something much more worthy of, discussion than the algae in the reflecting pool.
Well, and even on top of that, after Yorktown. I mean, the British attitude essentially was, I mean, it's chronicled in the Hamilton book and in the movie, right? The play, I should say. You'll be back. You guys, you're scrappy. Give you that, but you're not going to be able to pull this off. This is harder than you think it's going to be. You will be screaming for us to come back and help you, and that was almost true. It was almost prophetic. I mean, it was not like it was just some smooth sailing right out of the gate. And then, 90 years later, you have a civil war? That should tear most countries apart, almost tore this country apart. I mean, it's been less than 200 years since the Civil War. I mean, when you think about it and you compare the United States of America in terms of age to a lot of the European countries that are over here right now celebrating the World Cup, we're an infant compared to them. Maybe an adolescent, maybe a preteen, prepubescent teenager. That's about it compared to them. And yet there almost seems to fail to be a true appreciation for kind of the miracle that this country is, except for people who come here from other places. Like we had an exchange student from Finland who lived here who just couldn't get over America. Blew him away. Can't wait to come back. He's coming back this fall. Wants to come back like for my daughter's wedding. And I'm sure some of that is to see the wedding, but most of that is to come back to America. Just loves it. The football games, just everything about it, you know. I mean, and I don't know, and I guess it's pretty natural, I guess, to take things for granted, to get used to things, to go, oh well, this is how it is. But I just think sometimes the miracle that is America is not fully appreciated.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think that what the United States became is sort of unbelievable, right? Like you went from this like small group of people who are taking on the British Empire, and it became the most powerful country in the world and the richest country in the world. And if you put it in even more perspective, you just think like the original settlers that came over, I mean, we're talking about, you know, a small group of people. And you think that you think about those settlers and you think about the small group of people that are the first people on the shores. And if somebody had said to you like, hey, those people who just arrived, that landmass is going to become the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world one day. Right? Like people would have been like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? Like that doesn't even, you know, it wouldn't even compute.
No.
And that's the thing though, is that I think this is how we've kind of gotten here. Like, why are we debating, you know, algae in the pool? Right? It's indicative of how we got here. How we got here is, number one, we don't educate people on this stuff anymore. We not only don't educate them on this stuff anymore, but we don't educate them properly to the extent that we do educate them. Like when they are, when they're taught about these things, well, I mean, first of all, now it's gotten so out of control because now when they're taught about these things, they're always taught about the imperfections or the limitations of the revolution. They're always taught about, you know, the failure of the United States to live up to lofty expectations and that kind of stuff. But forget that. Set that aside. I mean, the thing is we just don't do enough to teach students about like how insane this all is. We sort of take it for granted because we kind of know the ending, right? Like we know where we are now,
yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, one of the things I always say is like somebody asked me once, like, why is nostalgia so powerful? And I said, well, because nostalgia is so powerful because you know how things work out. So like when you think back on like your childhood, you don't think back on all of the insecurities that you had as a child. You don't think about the time that you were sitting up at night wondering if that girl was going to call you back. You don't think about,
she did,
you know, your friend.
I mean, just a spoiler.
You don't think about like some argument you had with your friends, or you don't think about like the hard class you took in high school and how you just like, you know, and how much studying you did or something like that. You don't think about those things at all because those things fade as time goes by, because You know how things worked out. All those things that seemed like big deals back then were not big deals at all, and you know that now. But you can only know it with the benefit of hindsight. And
that girl missed out, though.
Yes,
I mean, if you think about it, like,
that's right.
I mean, she probably looks back and thinks I blew that.
She
right?
could be joining the show right
she could
now.
Be right
I
now.
mean,
Yeah.
that's the trouble. With that's the trouble with sort of how people are educated, is like they're not even given this story of like the sort of improbability of the success that that is the United States. Like, just to think about all of the things that had to go right. Like, I mean, even if you just think about the fact that like that century where England is preoccupied with all this internal conflict, that created the ability for all of these colonies to develop self-rule, to develop their own institutions, to govern themselves, to direct their lives, and to see the results of that, and to see how successful it was. And the thing is like that's only possible because England is so preoccupied with other stuff, right? And so
the English come back over to, hey, we're going to flex our muscles now. It's time for get you guys in line. And a lot of that is also the country. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're probably better at this history than I am. The country is in debt. They just fought wars. They say, hey, let's tax these colonists a little bit. Let's pad the coffers some at their expense. And obviously, the colonists say, whoa, what do you mean you're essentially raising taxes? You're putting a stamp tax, a tea tax, all these different taxes that you're putting into place. And that's what I'm worried about the interview thing working. I hope it is. I've sent an email asking Harry, is somebody having problems? But, they send all these, they raise all these taxes, and people do what people at least used to do when taxes raised. They revolted. It's literally the beginnings of revolution. And there was a lot of resistance by the colonists to revolt. I mean, there were still a lot of people. I mean, half at least that were loyalist. What are we doing? This is silly. Just pay the tax. We're lucky to have the English protecting us. We're lucky to have the English providing services for us. I mean, it wasn't like you always say, and it's a great point. Every time you say it, I always think, man, I haven't really thought about it that way. If you were to read the newspapers, if you will, before a revolution, it's a minority, and they're almost scoffed at. Like, man, what are you guys doing? Come on. And then when they're successful, people look back and go, oh, yeah, I mean, you can see this coming a mile away, right? I mean, this was not a big prediction. This was predicting A.J. DeManza to go number one. Of course he was going number one. But, if you'd said 4 years ago, hey, this kid from Boston that's going to this school in Utah is going to go number one in the 2026 draft, people would have said, no, come on now. Really? That's why he's running from the competition in Boston? I mean, and that's not a good example, but, you understand the point. I mean, in 1770, if you told people, hey, we're going to revolt against the British Empire and win, the overwhelming majority of the colonists would have said that is absurd. No, we're not. I'm not. I'm not getting killed by them. I'm not fighting them. I mean, that would have been the had you been able to take a poll then, that's what the poll would have said.
Well, and one of the things too is like one of the things I prefer to say is, when you compare revolutions historically, not very successful. And so one of my things is that, I view the American Revolution as much more of an evolution than a revolution. And what I mean by that is if you think of the French Revolution was very, very obviously a revolution. Like, it was a dramatic change in society. If you look at the American Revolution, it was not like that. It was much more of an evolution. It was much more tied to exactly the sorts of things that had gone on in England and that were continuing to go on in England. One of the arguments after the French and Indian War, when the colonies start to be taxed, is that those colonies, the arguments that they were making were things like, hey, the English have been arguing that Parliament is the one who gets to determine taxation, right? And that and that in order for the king to collect taxes, the king has to work through Parliament.
That was me. I was making sure it was working.
And so, that you have to work through Parliament. And so the thing is that if you, we're not represented in Parliament. So if we're not represented in Parliament, like, how can we be taxed? Like, apply the same principles to us. Like, that's how it was argued early on. And so because it was argued that way early on, we really had this, you can really think of it as more of an evolution than a revolution, right? It was appealing back to the same principles that the English were applying to themselves and saying, hey, we are, these are English colonies. That applies to us as well.
Do you know if our first guest is on the Eastern time zone?
I'm gonna message him.
Because sometimes that gets the confusion. No matter how smart people are, including, no matter who, the time zone thing gets you. In podcast world, ask me how I know. That's happened. It's happened quite a bit. No, I just think it's always kind of a fascinating thing why the American Revolution the way it is taught has been watered down. Some of it, I think, is, at least in America's public schools, from my experience with 3 kids, is that U.S. history is taught quickly. And at least in our part of the country, there is such a hurry to get to the civil rights movement. Everybody hang with me real quick. I'm going to switch scenes and get Scott Morris in. I'll let you introduce him when we get him in.
Oops.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, I thought I was in the green room.
We're bringing you on. We're bringing you on a little early.
Okay.
just to kind of introduce Scott. So Scott's a fellow at the Declaration Center at Ole Miss. Scott's a author, speaker extraordinaire. Scott was the what were you? You were the executive editor at Oxford American. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, really, what we're going to do with our guests is, we are allowing you to we're just America maxing. Okay. So we're just celebrating America. We're talking about how great things are. We've just been talking about sort of how rare the American Revolution is, right, in history, how different it is, how poorly it's taught to students, things like that. But so I'll just start you off real general. What do you wish people knew about America, about the Revolution, about the founding, anything what do you wish they knew better?
I wish we lived in a time of less peril so that I could point to one thing or maybe 2 things. But there are a variety of things that we need urgently. And I think most of them can be diagnosed, as you said, as just a lack of understanding basic things about our country, its principles, its founding principles. Why those founding principles were adopted is a very important thing. It wasn't as if they were the only ones lying around. In fact, these principles were revolutionary and they were chosen for a certain reason. But when I look at what has happened in New York, and Josh, this is something that you and I have talked about, and you wrote an incredibly prescient piece for the magazine that we've just started at the Declaration Center, in which you outlined the level of ignorance that we are facing. I may be wrong, but I don't think that the majority of people who are espousing doctrines that, or let's just get down to it, that are espousing Marxism and socialism, I do not think that they would continue to espouse those doctrines if they had a primer in basic economics. I think it really comes down to something that bland and unadulterated. I think that a lot of the people that you see on legacy media and on various podcasts, they have amplified vocabularies. They can cite various books that have been written in the last 20 years. But if you ask them to define what a market was, supply and demand, just basic categories like that, I would be shocked if that knowledge was widespread and yet they chose socialism or Marxism. So I think this is an ignorance problem. That does not make it any easier to deal with. I guess on the bright side of things, you could say that people are reachable. That if they were exposed, what's that?
In what way? When you say reachable, what do you mean?
Well, you're hopeful, right? If it were the case that our country is experiencing a surge of true believers who know their economics, say we're well versed in why socialist economies have failed in the past, and they had what they thought was an answer to that. But I don't even think we're dealing with that kind of debate. That kind of debate that, as Josh and we talked about before, the kind of debate that you might see at a university in the 1980s and 1990s, when you had, real Marxists and they would debate economics. And that's not the kind of debates that you see anymore. It's just good enough to say that a certain state of affairs should obtain. And if that state of affairs is inspirational, i.e. wiping out poverty, social justice, any of the varieties of social justice, to have said that a certain end state is desirable is the end of the argument. Whether or not it's possible, it's the end of the argument. And that's where we are. And so there's no evidence is necessary. The criteria is simple and straightforward. Are you a moral person or not? And we know whether or not you are moral. We don't need economics for that. We just need to know, why are you opposed to people having more money? Why are you opposed to people not having the things that they want or they need? Why are you, and it is this outrageous, why are you in favor of Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire while there's poverty? It's like, that's the level that the debate is on. So, I mean, somewhat tongue in cheek, I say it's hopeful in the sense that if that's the level of the debate, then we're debating people who don't know why they believe what they believe, other than the fact that it gives them a great deal of moral certitude, and it makes them feel good.
So for both of you, I'm curious, when you see, I think the election, I lose track of days, some days, and this is one of those weeks. But I think there was an election in New York yesterday, and
oh yes,
three wards or boroughs or whatnot went to Mondami sponsored candidates. So obviously his message is, for lack of a better word, resonating in New York. You see what's happening in California. It spurred a question. I think this was on social media today, where someone was asking this honestly, and it sounds outlandish on the surface, and I think it probably is, but I want to get y'all's thoughts on it. When you see that happening and a young person says, I'm concerned, is the U.S. going to be a free country in 50 years, in 100 years? Mm-hmm. Is that an absurd question, given what you see happening in New York, what you see happening in California, and the level of kind of hatred there is towards Trump, towards Elon Musk, who should be sort of an American dream, right? Instead, he's viewed as this evil, all sorts of the greed, all this. I wish I could speak as articulately as you guys can, but you understand my point. I mean, that's a question that was asked, and 50 years ago, nobody would have asked that question, I don't think, and here we are.
No, I think this is the thing that's the most frustrating about these victories. The thing that's the most frustrating about these victories is that socialism, communism, these kinds of things, they were predominantly advocated by, academics and people like that, like in the United States, like among the rank and file people in the United States, there was no taste for this. And part of that is because of the unique experience of America, right? Like it was socialism and communism were antithetical to the American way of life. So given that they are antithetical to the American way of life, these ideologies didn't make progress with the common man, right? Like if you think about Marxism and communism, the revolution is supposed to come from the workers on up, right? It's supposed to start with the workers. Well, it turns out the workers in the United States were pretty happy with the kind of deal that they were getting, right? Like, sure, they would like things to be better. Sure, maybe they wanted their union a little stronger or something like that. But by and large, they were much more willing to work within the system to try to get, better conditions for themselves. And they were not willing to just throw out everything, and overhaul the entire system for something new, because they realized, how good they had it. I think the thing that's disheartening about these recent victories is that we're losing that. We're losing those, to really stick with the analogies, we're losing like the antibodies, right? Like there's no, there's no natural revulsion to this stuff. This stuff used to be just, this stuff used to be something that just appealed to such a small percentage of the population that it was never going to take hold. And now what you're seeing is across large cities in America, you're seeing this movement towards these candidates who are not, they're not doing it in subtle, subversive ways, like people on the left have kind of done in the past. Now they're just coming out and saying it, right? They're just saying like, hey, I'm a democratic socialist. Like, hey, I believe in redistributing these resources. They're just explicit about this stuff. And even though they're explicit about it, you're starting to see that, hey, the reason they're explicit about it is that it's no longer as unpopular as it once was. You don't have to hide the motivation anymore.
That's right. I think about Josh, in your article, you quote one of Yeltsin's. It was Yeltsin's biographer, but the biographer was quoting one of Yeltsin's top assistants, who reported that on the flight back, Yeltsin had been visiting America. He was in Houston. He went to a grocery store, and there are famous photographs. You can Google them. We ran some of these photographs in our magazine piece that Josh wrote. And it shows Yeltsin, and he sees this aisle of groceries, and the plenitude causes him to raise his hands up and just he's in awe. He can't believe it. And as Josh writes, on the plane back, he apparently was so distraught, and he said, "I cannot believe," and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, "I cannot believe the suffering that we've caused our people. That we'll never be forgiven for this." So I have a question. Have we learned anything different about economics since the last massive experiment with this kind of thing? And if we haven't, given the level of suffering, why would we want to try it again? So the bar would be the highest possible. And the mention of paradise as a possibility in terms of an outcome, that's not good enough. Given the suffering that this way of thinking has caused in the past, the only way a rational person would entertain it at all is if someone said, "Hey, I know that was true in the past, but we've discovered something new about economics." That's what they would need to be able to evidence for us, right?
Yeah, and so we know that they haven't, right? We know that they haven't discovered anything. But this is the thing. Okay, I do think there's a couple things. I think some of the fault, well, a lot of the fault lies with former politicians. Like, I mean, I tell people all the time, there are all these people that when they ask me about current events, Trump, sucks all the oxygen out of the room. That's all anybody wants to talk about is Donald Trump. But when I talk to people about Donald Trump, they always seem to think that Donald Trump is causing all kinds of things. That like before Donald Trump, we didn't have these problems, and now he's causing all of these problems. And what I try to get across to people is that I don't see Trump as a cause of much of anything, actually. I see Trump as an effect. And I think this applies when you look at this turn towards socialism and communism, right, is that what's going on here is I think you had three kind of seminal events, right? Okay, so one is beginning in the 1960s, you had this massive patronage network on the left that got established, right? Like, um, people on the right are very unwilling to give money to anything unless they're going to get a rate of return, right? That's part of the reason that they're on the right in the first place, right? It's a sort of characteristic of their personality. They're not just going to throw money at a bunch of people and hope that it works out. On the left, though, you saw what happened is, during the, all of these protesters in the 60s and the 70s who were, let's face it, they were domestic terrorists. They were getting arrested, but then, subsequently, they were all given cushy academic jobs at prestigious universities around the country. And so what that teaches you is that if you're on the left, it teaches you that there's rewards to this kind of behavior. That, yeah, there might be short-term costs, but there's long-run rewards. Like, you will be rewarded with patronage. Right? We will support you for doing these kinds of things. And it's that process, and part of the larger process, which was not only was this patronage going on at the time, but they were also just, they realized that in order to make any progress, they were going to have to take over these institutions. They were really going to have to infiltrate the institutions and take them over. They weren't going to be able to create institutions of their own and support for their ideas on their own, because it just seemed antithetical to the American way of life. But if you can invade the educational system, if you can take over these institutions, then one of the things that you can do is you can start reshaping those institutions to your preferences. And I think that we've seen that in higher education, but we've also seen it, and it gets way less attention in sort of K through 12 education. It's been dumbed down. They don't teach you what what they should be teaching you. You're not getting that background. But I think the other thing is then there's a couple other factors that did this. One, we can't ignore the fact that the changing nature of our immigration system is bringing people from places where communism is not antithetical to their way of life. If you think about the people who are migrating here from the beginning of the United States onwards, right? Obviously, you had the people who are coming from England, but you think about the other places people were coming from, right? They were coming from the Netherlands, right, which had a rich, capitalist tradition. They were coming from Germany, mostly to, escape what they saw as sort of, intolerance among, the tiny little states that made up Germany. And then subsequently after unification, because they sort of saw that they saw a threat of large unified power. And so you had people who were coming from Western Europe. They're Christians, they're capitalists, they're skeptical of executive power. They're tired of living under a king. That's what was driving them here. If you look at the recent trends in immigration, you're bringing people in from places where they don't have any of these traditions. They're very, very poor. They're not Christian. They have, there's a lot of different characteristics that just don't fit. And because of that, you've got they don't have the antibodies. They don't have that. They don't have that built up intolerance to this kind of thing. And then I think the last thing is you look at how the financial crisis was managed. The financial crisis was managed extremely poorly, right? We essentially bailed out the Wall Street banks, while millions of people around the United States lost their homes. And you can say, hey, well, we shouldn't have bailed out, all of these people who took out mortgages they couldn't afford and things like that. Okay, that's fine. But at the same time, then what you have to acknowledge is that, you can make that argument, and that argument's a lot stronger if you didn't also bail out banks. And if you didn't see people getting bailouts and then continuing to give, massive, benefits packages to their executive staff. And so I think when you combine all three of those things, there's been a takeover of the institutions. There's been a change in the composition of the American voter. And then there's a lot of backlash at feeling like, hey, the system is rigged, and so let's just replace the system.
Yeah, I think we're at a great disadvantage given the fact that at least one of the three things that you brought up, which is central to any rational discussion of this issue, and that is the immigration. It's considered, for a huge segment of the population, you can't even talk about that. That certain things that must be discussed in this country, you're not allowed to discuss, which I have to hand it to the left. That's a shrewd move. Instead of debating the substance of these arguments, instead, let's create an environment in which certain ideas can't be discussed at all. And Josh, what you presented, I think everyone recognizes this. It's not racist. It's not nativist. It has nothing to do with either one of those things. But part of the problem that we have just now is we can't even have the kind of discussion that you need to have if you're going to have a vibrant republic, when crucial topics can't be discussed. But I think your diagnosis is so shrewd that I'm now more depressed than when I started. I mean, I think you're right on the money there, and it's scary. I've got to say, what's going on? It is frightening. I think, and it calls. And Josh, the way that you just outlined it makes clear it's not just one solution. We have to move forward on a variety of different, planes of interaction in order to get this accomplished. But it wasn't this way. It is this way. And there's no reason why it can't go to a better place. But the demographic element that you talked about with immigration, what that means is it won't happen without something happening to cause it. So I think a lot of people, and I am one of those people, but I really think like what's happened just since as we head into the midterms and I'm seeing the candidates that are running and winning, I would have characterized myself as something of a normie. I was operating under the hidden assumption that this country is so great that it will always prevail. But if you ask me to defend that assumption, I would have to acknowledge it was an assumption which I really don't have any evidence for defending. And
that's where Scott, I get into we're such a young country, and we take that. Obviously, we all have lifetimes that hopefully take us into our 80s or 90s, but to one person, 250 years sounds like a long time. But when you think about 250 years in the context of world history, of how old the European countries are, the Asian countries are, we're an infant country that I think, right? I mean, the king was like, "You'll be back," and I think the assumption was like, well, he obviously meant like in a couple of years, you guys will be like, this doesn't work. Who knows? Maybe he meant in 270 years, you guys will fail. You'll be right back begging for us to come back and save you. I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but I think going back to the question that the young person asked on social media about 50 years, as listening to you talk, the more I listen to you talk about what you just said, I think, well, it's not that dumb of a question. It's not outlandish, because to Scott's point, something has to happen to reverse that trend, or else that trend continues. And if the trend continues and becomes widespread, well, world history says that's exactly where it goes. It goes to a place where you aren't free any longer.
Yeah, and I think that's the remarkable thing about the American Revolution, right? Is that
let me interrupt just real fast. Yeah. Just this week, Kamala Harris on an interview with some buffoon was, again, bemoaning the Electoral College. Well, the Electoral College is one of the safeguards that we have. It's one of the guardrails that we have that protects, the guy that lives in Topeka, Kansas, or the farmer that lives in Nebraska, having the same representation as the multimillionaire who lives on the Lower East Side in Manhattan. That was the brilliance of the system, is that the farmer in Louisiana is protected, has the same rights, the same vote as the rich guy in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I think the thing about the United States is that I think a lot of people in the United States take the United States for granted. I think, and especially because other countries in some ways have tried to imitate the United States. Like the Europeans do a lot of things and have done a lot of things over time, right, to that were influenced by what's going on in the United States. And I think that a lot of people in the United States have a tendency to think that Europe is just like us, all right, and that we're, we all, we're all part of this same thing. And it's like, no. Like the United States is incredibly unique. It's incredibly unique in a variety of ways. And one of the ways that it's unique is like throughout the entirety of human history, it's mostly the story of, strong leaders sort of repressing their populations, right? And so the idea that you can have something like the United States and you can have representation and you can have, your voice be heard and you can live, a free and prosperous life. This is not something that's common to human history, right?
Alex Salter, kind enough to join us. He was in the green room for a while. I'm sure he was enjoying like the M&Ms and that kind of thing that we had laid out in there. Said some beverages and things of that nature. Alex, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the snacks. Very kind of you. I'm really happy to be here.
That's what we try to do at MPW Digital. We
spare no expense.
We spare no expense in the green room. I mean, it's no budget whatsoever. It's take care of the people who take care of us.
Veuve Clicquot.
You can say
I had a big bottle of Veuve Clicquot waiting for me in the green room. Alex, I don't know what you want.
I specifically requested a bowl of M&Ms, but only the green ones, and my request was perfectly adhered to.
We read the contracts. We spare no expense. This is a safe space. It's just the four of us here. You can be as based as you want to be, Alex. You have to tell us what is so great about the United States.
Well, it's definitely something to reflect on as we approach the semi-quincentennial. Try saying that word 5 times fast. What I really am optimistic about when I look to the future of the American experiment is America is unique in how affirming we are still, even in all the challenges, of the role of religion in public life. The United States was explicitly founded on Christian principles in the sense that it was founded on universal human dignity and human rights. And you just don't get widespread belief in those things unless you already come from a society that takes the incarnation of God and Jesus Christ seriously. You don't get it in other kinds of civilizations. Judaism comes close. Islam sometimes comes close. Other world religions have their own versions of why human beings are important. But if you look at the books that informed the founding fathers, that actually went into the nuts and bolts of the founding documents, it was the Bible. It was the Christian natural law tradition. And I think that the reason that we have religion so widely baked into the social fabric of the United States is one of the reasons that the nation has been so durable. And it's one of the reasons that I think that we've been doing a good job of keeping our traditions comparatively in a better way than a country such as England has. They're obviously not doing so well right now. And I think a lot of the problems that they have are with a deterioration in public morality associated with, quite frankly, things being not so good with the Church of England. So if I'm going to be optimistic about the United States, and I am, the role of American religion in American public life makes me excited to see what the next couple of years are going to bring.
Thank you for bringing things up, because we had just been lamenting, what's currently wrong in the United States. And so how confident are you that I mean, I guess we won't be talking about it, but I guess how confident are you that, somebody's doing a America 500 special edition?
Oh, I'm very confident that someone will be doing an American 500 special edition. It's a very open question, of course, about what exactly they're going to mean by that pesky word, America. We made it to a quarter of a millennium. What's it going to look like at half a millennium? I'm not going to do the comparison with Rome thing because I think it's overdone. I really think that the next couple of years, the next 5 to 10 years, are going to be essential if we're going to rebuild the foundations of small d democratic constitutional government. Because that's the one area where I think that we need the most shoring up. Our formal institutions simply don't look like they're supposed to look if you take the Constitution of the United States seriously. And to tie it back into what I said about religion, you can't actually have fidelity to those constitutional principles if you do not have a very high view of public morality. And almost certainly that view of public morality is going to be buttressed by religion. George Washington explicitly said this in his farewell address. Among the indispensable things for nations to get right, you got to have high public morality and you have to have religion. Indispensable is his word. And you're not going to get widespread public morality without adherence to religious principle. John Adams said that our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly unsuited to the governance of any other. If we take the social contract seriously, we have to realize, look, we want to make sure that we play politics by the rules. We want to make sure we actually follow this document. But that doesn't just happen. You need deep ethical commitments to fair play, to human dignity, to natural rights, to treating your political opponents as opponents instead of enemies. Now, in some ways, it's unfortunate that we're in the political circumstances that we are, since I personally think that one political tribe has fully repudiated those principles, just 100%. And the other political tribe is flirting with repudiating those principles, but hasn't yet. And so I think that it's important that we, as we celebrate the semi-quincentennial, if we're going to rededicate the United States, if we're going to embrace our traditions and live them forward, Christianity has to be among them.
I
That's
just
deep.
recently watched the movie about George Whitfield and Benjamin
I've heard of it,
Franklin.
but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely worth watching. But it underscores what the point that you just made. The American Revolution, there was prep work that was done. The prep work goes all the way back to Genesis, but I mean something that was more recent, and that is revival was taking place throughout the colonies. And I was speaking with someone the other day, and Alex, I love what you said, because it bears out on the ground. I was talking with someone from my church, and they were, saying, well, what you're doing at the Declaration Center is you are trying to reclaim students, teach them the civics that that we all learned in school, but they didn't. Most of my students are very candid in saying that they've never been taught these things. It's not that they were taught a bad version of them, although that happens, but it's really worse than that. It's no version at all. It's just not something that is talked about. But I told him, I said, there has to be an effort to reclaim the university. As Josh said, I mean, we have kids who graduate from high school. They like their parents more or less. They like their church more or less. They like their hometown more or less. Their parents spend, in some cases, 6 figures. They come back 4 years later. They hate their parents. They hate their town. They hate their church. They hate America. And they're going to be miserable for the rest of their lives because they hate the human condition and they hate reality. And so we are pretty far downstream when you think about it at the university level, although we have to fight at that level. And when I think about going to the headwaters, that is when I think about Christianity. When I think about going to the source, to the wellspring, those fundamental principles. And I think one thing that I would really want to stress is that what this really comes down to is your doctrine of human nature. You show me your doctrine of human nature, and I will tell you what your politics are likely to be. Not necessarily what they're likely to be, and let me explain. Because if you believe that rights are good things that are worth considering, that we can come together and agree to grant each other, that's not what our founders understood. Our founders understood that our rights came into the world with us, that we were designed by God to be accorded these rights. So that's fundamental. And now I think what you have, I think unspoken, I don't think many people would come out and say, I don't believe in that old-fashioned notion of human nature. I think we're more just like a biological species. We're just organisms. Well, that is antithetical to the founding understanding of human nature. That's not going to work. But as Huxley, pointed out in Brave New World, organisms, and there's a reason why he started off by the first humans we encounter are in test tubes, because they have become full organisms. They're no longer human beings, they're organisms. And organisms are things that respond to pleasure and pain. Organisms are things that are fully satisfied so long as the pleasure that they desire, their basic needs, have been met. But our founders' understanding of human nature, you can call it the Judeo-Christian understanding of human nature. You can look at the first chapter of Genesis. You can look at Galatians in the New Testament. But that doctrine of human nature says that human beings are granted by God certain inalienable rights. And they're not just rights that were thrown onto us accidentally. We are designed to require liberty because we have liberty of conscience. We are born with that. We have freedom of thought, and therefore we require a sphere of sovereignty, is one real way of looking at it. And no other human being has the right, the wherewithal to interfere with our sphere of sovereignty. And for the people who came here in the 1600s, that sphere of sovereignty was everything, because they were willing to cross an ocean with, the first people who got, like, over 100 people just vanished, the lost colony. So the news that was getting back in terms of should you take this trip, I mean, it's not entirely encouraging. The people who took that trip believed that the most important thing in the world was their conscience before God. It starts there and it ends there. And if you believe that that's the most important things that human beings do, then liberty must be maximized. It's that, not comfort, but liberty. So I think that if you put it to students, say, because it's interesting, because the woke culture, they claim to have a very high value of human nature. But in fact, the way they treat human beings is not dignified, in my opinion. But they do speak more to human beings as organisms, as pleasure seekers, as people that need a certain level of comfort to be fully satisfied.
I think that that's exactly right. The United States' founding documents take for granted a certain anthropology, understanding of what it means to be human. And it is a religious one. Even the founding fathers, who were themselves religiously heterodox, if you look at the John Adams, who was a Unitarian, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, even though they were not small O Orthodox Christians, they bought into the dignitarian arguments that really were only current philosophically because they came from a larger well of a broadly Christian culture. The United States is unique, but it also has an intellectual prehistory, as you said. It's not just a Western nation. Someone once wrote that it is the Western nation par excellence, right? If we look at the Western political tradition and its emphasis on both freedom and virtue, liberty and order as flip sides of the same coin, the flourishing recognition of both natural rights and natural duties, practiced in a context where politics had to take place consensually in the context of a social compact, right? Using a word that suggests certain, frankly, holy connotations beyond just a contract. That's where that all comes from. And this is what we should be talking about on our nation's 250th birthday. And this is what we should be teaching. It's relevant to everything. I teach in a business school. It is absolutely relevant to the practice of business if you want to figure out what's ethical, what's not ethical, what you should do as you confront practical moral dilemmas on a daily basis as you run your own business or work in someone else's business. It's by no means obvious how you should do that and what ethical paradigm should inform you. We should be talking about virtue. We should be talking about the importance of practicing moral habits of excellence. That's where virtue comes from. We are what we repeatedly do, Aristotle said. And then the Christian philosophers took that up for obvious reasons, because it's an important point even for Christianity too. So this goes to say that our formative institutions have admittedly dropped the ball on this, but we can pick up the ball. And in many places, people are already picking up the ball. Look at the sprouting of civic centers all across the country. Look at the Declaration of Independence Center that you just mentioned, right? Look at what's going on at Hamilton, at Florida, or Civitas and the University of Texas. So I think that there are reasons to be cautiously optimistic that even in higher ed, where we are constantly subject to the dysfunctionality of the faculty senate and everything that it entails, even in higher ed, I think that there's a case that we are going to start getting this right. But it's not going to happen automatically. If the American way of looking at politics has a blind spot, it's the idea that you can do all this by autopilot. Just set up the rules of the game right, set up the Constitution right, and then we're done, right? There's nothing left to do. Now you have to actually practice it. You have to actually renew it. You have to actually do the thing. You have to get the Constitution right, but then you got to do politics right, and they have to reinforce each other. So we need to push for more of these institutes to be set up. We need to make sure that they're staffed by people who are explicitly on board with the uniqueness and, quite frankly, the excellence of the United States. And we need to teach that there is something here that is worth defending and worth preserving.
Our new guest, by the way, excuse my, if you're watching this on YouTube, God bless you. Thank you for being here. Excuse my clunky production skills, but this is, we don't do this very often where we have multiple guests on at once. And so I've had to move some things around, but it's Brian Cutzinger. He's an assistant professor of economics at Florida Atlantic. He is the Phil Smith Fellow at the Phil Smith Center for Free Enterprise, the current director of the American Institute for Economic Research's Sound Money Project, and also the associate editor of the academic journal Public Choice. Brian, thanks for joining us here on this Wednesday evening.
Thanks for having me. I got my USA hat and my MTV American flag shirt.
He knew the assignment.
I love the MTV. The MTV shirt brings me back to like my college days. It kind of it's very nostalgic.
Yep. So I'm just enjoying the conversation. What I've heard so far, anyway, I thought it's been fantastic.
Listen, you have my permission. This is the Josh Hendrickson Show. You have my permission. You can be as based as possible. Like it's just the five of us. You know, you could say whatever you want. We are here to celebrate America. We are here to talk about how great the United States is, what makes the United States different from everybody else. You know, so the floor is yours. What do you want to say about America? What should we be celebrating about America at 250?
So my wife asked me this morning, what I was going to talk about, and I think she was expecting me to go off on some crazy rant about something nuts. She calls it going full Brian, but actually, I when I was thinking about it, was a little bit dippy. If a couple months ago, I did something with the National Review Institute, where we were reading some stuff by Buckley on the conservative case for gratitude. And it got me thinking a little bit. And I think about this every time the country's birthday comes around. I read the Declaration of Independence aloud every 4th of July. I read, What to the Slave is the 4th of July by Frederick Douglass. Earlier this month, I listened to Eisenhower's speech to the men who were going to be landing on the beaches in Normandy. And I do this. I did it before I read the Buckley piece, but I do it because I think that in order for us to, how do I want to put this? In order to make America a great country.
Hey, Brian, because I don't want to miss this. You're kind of going in and out a little bit. I think it might be your AirPods. Sometimes with Ecamm, those balk on us a little bit. They can be kind of tricky.
Let me try standard MacBook speaker and see if that works.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Wait, hold on. How about now?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's an AirPod Ecamm interface thing.
Gotcha. So what I was going to say is that I think it's important to have gratitude for the things that were done by the people that came before us, not just for the founders, although of course they deserve a great deal of honor. But also, you think about Alex and I are going to be talking about this in a couple weeks, or actually just a couple days. Joshua Chamberlain at Little Round Top on July 2nd, defending the Union during the Civil War, thinking about Eisenhower's speech to the men on D-Day. And I think that in some sense, we've been bequeathed this amazing country with an amazing set of institutions and almost an unimaginable amount of wealth. And I think to keep that going, you have to have some gratitude for what the people did to make that happen. And then also think to yourself, well, what am I going to do to make sure that the people that come after me are going to be able to enjoy this as well? And as I get older, my sort of, old man yells at clouds sort of complaint is that it seems like what we've become is sort of we're primarily interested with just consuming this amazing abundance that's been bequeathed to us, rather than trying to grow it into something even more. So that was my sort of thing when my wife asked me, like, what are you going to talk about? She was shocked, right? She was expecting me to go on some rant about something in the news or Democrats or whatever, and I was like, actually, no. This time of year, I try to put aside all that craziness and just be thankful that I was born in the United States, that I'm a citizen of the United States, that I get to live in this amazing country, and to reflect a little bit about what the people that came before me did to make that possible, and what I can do in my own capacity to make sure that the people that come after me get to enjoy it too.
I'm gonna put this out to everybody, which is gonna make for a bad podcast because you're all gonna talk over each other. But I guess, like, what do you think that we get wrong, right? Like, what do you think that, like, all of us, right, are interacting with students, and what do you think that we get wrong? Like, what do you see in your students that they don't know that they should know, or that they, or that's just something that's lost, like something that was important, like when you were a student, or something that's just now completely disappeared? Because I notice these things like all the time, just like little things. And I'm interested to get your perspective on that kind of stuff. I guess we'll go in the order they are on the screen. So we'll start with Scott, and then go to Alex, and then Brian.
So there are some really big concepts that come to mind that have gone missing, without which our country cannot flourish or even survive. But let me point to a very specific one, and that is the fact that most people in this country, at least by the way that they talk, and certainly everyone that you see on media, seems to believe that our founding fathers set up a democracy, as opposed to fearing democracy and what democracy leads to, which is tyranny. Now, this is not a technical point, right? This is not esoterica. I mean, for the founders, the issue was tyranny by a powerful king, a dictator, or tyranny by my fellow citizens in the form of democracy. And democracy always led to tyranny. And they were convinced of that. And I am too. So I think that one thing that may seem small, but that would be enormous, is if people would be educated and to understand that we chose not to be a democracy and why. And then that would lead to an interesting debate, perhaps, because the people who want democracy could defend why they want democracy. And those of us who like the way that America was set up can explain why it was set up that way. That seems almost like a technical point, but with my students, see, once you say that we're a democracy, then the next thing out of your mouth is the only qualification it needs is that most people feel that way about it. And that's how they argue a lot of the time, because we're in a democracy and this is what most people want. So they say. So anyway, that. I'll throw that one into the ring.
Alex?
It's a good place to start. Tough act to follow. I am going to stay on brand and therefore on religion. I'm going to talk about separation of church and state. This is something that all my students take for granted. And they think that the Constitution does create that firm wall of separation between religious beliefs and anything having to do with public policy and or politics. Of course, if you've read the Constitution, you know that the phrase separation of church and state appears nowhere in it. In fact, the phrase does not appear in any single of America's founding documents. And the reason that it doesn't is because all of the founding fathers, even the religiously heterodox ones, believed that religion was important for public morality and that for all practical purposes, that religion was going to be Christianity. And so I talk to my students about the United States, about American governance, about history, and even the students that I have who are themselves men and women of faith, who are themselves religious, seem very reluctant to bring that faith into public. In some ways, the left has become very effective at convincing people that what we have is freedom of religion, which means freedom of worship only the act of worship. And even that has to stay behind closed doors. You can't bring any religiously motivated ethical principle into the public square, because otherwise you're just trying to impose your religion on me.
Happened in Major League Baseball just in the last, week and a half with the San Francisco Giants.
Oh, yeah.
It's ongoing on.
Yeah, the pitchers
that's going on right now. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's going on with private organizations, it's going on with public organizations. What we really need to do, though, is actually look under the hood every once in a while. Brian talked about reading those important documents when the 4th of July rolls around. Most of us have heard about these documents so many times that what we think we know about them just ain't so. I think I'm quoting Yogi Berra there. We have to actually check what the text says, what the modifications say, what the amendments say, what the actual statute law says, especially now Supreme Court decisions, that those are becoming increasingly recent. But this idea that you can't have religion of any kind, in particular Christian religion, in American public life is quite frankly false and anti-American. We have to get back from that. We have to welcome a public debate informed by ethical principles that are informed by religious principles, or not. You don't have to be a religious person. You can be a good citizen and not be religious yourself. But you can't say, no, 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 that particular belief is religiously motivated, and so you got to check it at the door.
Right.
That dog don't hunt.
Brian?
So, going back to my earlier comments, I was very lucky when I was in high school, as a freshman in high school, and I took civics, that I had a teacher that really loved American civics, and he instilled a love of American civics in me too. And I guess I took that for granted, that everybody had that same experience with a high school teacher that loved civics and got their students to love it too. And perhaps students who or people who are approximately my age had that experience. But when I talk to students now in the classroom, there is no sort of love of this of the system that was given to us by our founders. Instead, it's either there's no understanding of it at all, or it's it's irredeemably racist and bigoted and an artifact of an older time. uh, or it doesn't let me do what I want to do, to get to Scott's point, and therefore, like, we should get rid of it. I find myself, um, I care a great deal about the rules because I think that's how maybe we get things to work the right way. And to Alex's point, the sort of the ethical principles that underlie adherence and respect for those rules. Now it's basically they don't know what those rules are, or they think the rules are racist, or they think the rules are an impediment to achieving whatever their objective happens to be. Even if, by the way, if it's an objective I share, I still think the process actually matters because we have different ways of dealing with one another, and throughout most of human history, the way that we did that was through basically my tribe kills your tribe, or vice versa. And the rules are basically a way to, like, hey, let's not have that happen. Let's come together, let's have a conversation, we're gonna have to compromise, whatever. But these rules force discussion. And I think the concern, I this is probably maybe too much current events, I don't know, but what happened in New York last night with the people that made it through the Democratic primary, I don't see those people as actually saying, I disagree with I disagree with Brian's politics, but we share a mutual respect for the rules, and so we'll abide by whatever the outcomes that happen as long as they're followed by the rules. It's like, no, they actually hate the rules. They want to dismantle the rules that have made this possible. And I think that's what I see in my students is either apathy, or hatred of the rules, or just viewing them as being an impediment to their objective. And I think that's what we're missing.
Can I piggyback on that for a second? Because y'all are all around kids. I'm obviously not around just college students as much as you are. I have one that lives in my home and two that recently graduated from college. And obviously, like you, I live in a college town. I watched the reaction here when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. It was not long thereafter, a handful of weeks, when the vice president, J.D. Vance, and Erica Kirk came and spoke here in Oxford. And then, I've been around a lot of my kids' friends. They're at that age where they're starting to marry and that kind of thing. And so we're at functions and I'm around them a lot. I'm curious, when you guys are around college people now, do you sense optimism from them, hope from them for their futures, regarding just that they're going to, always the American dream, right, was that your children would live better than you did. Do you sense that there's a hope among them that they have that, or do you sense a concern that the country that they grew up with is getting away from them.
I'm happy to chime in here.
Go for it.
A couple issues you'll see, and they're nice as an econ professor because I can sort of fold them into the lectures and we can talk about some of the underlying economics of what's going on. But a few of the issues that come up with them are things like, can I afford a house? What is it going to take for me to start a family and have a home like what my parents had when I was growing up? The better students, I think, are concerned with how are we going to deal with the entitlements, right? What are we going to do to make Medicare and Social Security not become a giant drag on the public purse? Because ultimately, they're going to be the ones that are going to have to pay for it unless there's some other type of reform. So I think there is sort of a sense of which, and this I don't know, is also not great. I don't know what the opposite of like class warfare would be, but almost like age warfare, right? And so rather than, so you can have a society that sort of is separated along class lines, and so you get class conflict or racial conflict. But what I see with some of the students is more like an age conflict, that they view older generations as essentially they've locked people out of, let's say, home ownership. We've got these large entitlement programs for Social Security and Medicare that young people are going to end up paying into, but are never actually going to get to collect on anything. And I agree with their frustrations. The flip side, though, is when we start viewing one another as sort of, I don't know, people or not people that I'm going to try to punish because I don't like what they're doing. I think, again, that's not a great thing for American society. And so if we get to a place where young people start to think that their lives are going to be worse than their parents' lives, I think they're going to look for people to blame. And I suspect the people they're going to look to blame for that are going to be their parents, or the people of their parents' generation, I should say, or their grandparents' generation. And so that is one of the issues that comes up a lot with my students is they'll ask about those three issues in particular: housing affordability, Social Security, Medicare, and who's going to pay for it.
My students tend to be a little more optimistic. This might come from most students. I think about 60% of Texas Tech students come from about a 300-mile radius around Lubbock. And so for that reason, you look at the local real estate market, which is actually still pretty affordable, right? Unlike Brian's students, they're probably not thinking too hard about buying a home in Boca Raton.
Okay, yeah.
They want to live near where they grew up. They want to live near Lubbock. They want to live somewhere else in the Sun Belt that's affordable. And so one of the great things about living where I live and talking to the students that I have the privilege of teaching is that you realize that a lot of these narratives really only make sense if you assume that to live a good life, you need to be in like Haight-Ashbury or Manhattan or something like that. So yeah, I can understand economic anxiety if you have like a master's degree in puppetry and you're trying to live in San Francisco. But if you have a degree in energy commerce from Texas Tech University and you're going to go be a landman or you're going to go do something like that, you're going to make amazing money right away. You're probably going to be able to buy a starter home with like your first 6 months salary, and things are going to be okay for you. It's not going to be easy, but it's not supposed to be easy. It was never supposed to be easy, right? It was supposed to require hard work and prudence. And if you're willing to do that and you don't restrict yourself to the left or the right coast, I actually do think there's still a lot of room for economic opportunity. So I see a lot of that optimism almost just casually assumed amongst my students. And I'm actually happy for them for that, because I think that it means that they have their heads on straight and they know what they want out of life and they're going to be able to get it.
Yeah, I think it depends on where the students see themselves in 5 years, 10 years. A lot of the things are related to, hey, is the American dream dead? Right? Like, can I actually afford to graduate, buy a house, start a family at a young age? Can I actually do those things? There's a lot of concern about that. I would say, like, this is not literally correct. Okay, but I do find that I have students who are very worried about like the national debt, and it's not so much that they're worried about the national debt. It's like they're not literally worried about that, but it's issues tied to that, right? It's like what Brian mentioned. It's issues related to entitlements. It's issues related to, taxation. It's issues related to, just like they see these stories on the news about like how much debt the United States has and things like that, and they're like, what does that mean? Like, what's that going to mean for me in the future? Am I going to be able, if I'm saving, like whenever we talk about inflation, that's one of the things that they start talking about is like when you talk about debt and you talk about how when debt gets sufficiently high, it tends to get inflated away. Like the natural question that leads to in class isn't really macroeconomic related. It's sort of like, well, what does that mean for me?
Sure.
Like if this happens, what happens to my savings? What happens to, will I be able to buy a house? Like these are the kinds of things. And so I think on the one hand, it kind of depends. You have some students where you can tell that they kind of, they like where they're from. They kind of intend on going back to where they're from. And those students tend to be from smaller places, affordable places, and they don't seem as worried about it as like the student that just wants to move to Nashville when they graduate, or the and so I think that's part of the issue is there's an element of sort of urban living, I think, that they see as not possible for them, and some of them want that lifestyle. They want to live in a big city, at least when they're younger, right? They want to, they want that aspect, but then they look at it and they say, oh, well, this seems out of reach. And I think one place where I've gotten in trouble is like people ask me for advice all the time. And I keep telling people this and people sort of scold me for saying this is I tell the students that like the best thing that you can do is, find a nearby state school that doesn't require you to take on much student loan debt and go there. Because unless you can get into like the best program in your field in the United States, like, if Harvard is the greatest, whatever, like physics program or something like that in the United States and you get in, well, then you should probably do that. That's probably going to work out for you. But like, if you're trying to study, but like if you want to go into engineering, right? Like you dream of going to MIT, right? But the thing is that if you can't get into MIT, you should probably go to your local state school and do engineering and not accumulate a bunch of debt and then walk out with very little debt and a job opportunity. Because when you go to, these like career day things at Ole Miss and Alabama and all these big state schools, they have companies that are lined up waiting for engineering students, right? And so there, you're going to get a job and you're not going to be saddled with that debt. And I think the one thing that we've done that's horrible is we have kind of just thrown money at students and told them, hey, just go wherever you want, live your dream. And the problem is that some of these people, they are living like the American dream of their parents. They're just living it on a college campus. They're living basically for free. They're eating in the cafeteria. They just swipe a card. It's invisible money. They take these classes. They're surrounded by their friends. They spend their nights, they spend their weekend nights at the bar, and this is a great life. And the problem is that a lot of them end up, when they're done, the bill comes due and now they get a job and now the house that they wanted to buy is completely unaffordable. Like owning a house is now, 10, 15 years away for them. And they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm like 24 years old. Like what, like 15, if I have to wait 15 years to buy a house, like, my life is half over at that point. Like, what am I doing? And that's the problem is that we've convinced people that, they should just, that they should just, live the extravagant college experience. And I think one of the reasons I get flack for this is I work at a university, right? So universities don't like when you say that. But in fairness to me, I am advocating going to a local state school, which my school would qualify as. So, but I think that this is the thing that, people are not, I think that students are concerned, but it's particular types of students. And I think that a lot of times those particular types of students have been given very, very bad advice about how to go about life and how to get your life started the way that you want to get it started and how to be able to afford the lifestyle that you want to be able to afford. We do a really terrible job teaching people just basic financial life skills.
Is there an intentionality? I mean, and by the way, I keep laughing at the idea of majoring in puppetry. I can't. The through my mind. That's what I'm laughing at, and so I apologize.
Steve Sarkisian should have used that example.
Yeah, Sarkisian
better than basket weaving.
Exactly. Yeah. But I look back on like the early part of my like married life, and we had children, and I look back and think about it. We didn't have any money, but those were fun times, right? There was, you didn't really think about it. And your kids don't remember being poor when they were 2. They just they were what they were, right? The one I was going to say this when I stumbled through my thing. I did sort of sense in the last period of time being around some of the young people I've been around, there is more of a kind of a longing for a family values, longing for having children, an understanding that, hey, this message that's been sent to you about just doing nothing but chasing the corporate ladder to see how fast you can climb it is not going to be what fulfills you. Your fulfillment is going to come from love and family and faith and those kinds of things. And I do sense, at least among the young people I'm around, that there is sort of a reawakening to that.
I think that Charlie Kirk's influence was significant and is significant in that regard in particular. And we had one of our students who's a first-year law student. He wrote a piece on this. He wrote a piece, it was called The Delay of Adulthood. And as a first year, and I'm happy to say he just got married. But he said that, all of his friends, and sort of the idea was that, well, can you afford to get married? Is that a prudent decision to make? Shouldn't you wait? Or shouldn't you put your career first? And, he points out that we delay the things that in the long run have sustained humans since there have been human beings. And those things are not jobs, but those things are family and faith. And so we delay the things that we can depend on, and we count on the things that we can't. And I think a lot of students have seen that amounts to, one way to characterize that is spiritual bankruptcy. And so they feel like they've been sold a bill of goods, and been told that they can have anything that they want whenever they want it. Not that there are biological constraints. And when it comes to having a family, for example, I know a lot of women are very frustrated and in fact angry because they feel like they were sold a bill of goods. So I think you see a real spiritual hunger for sure. I notice that my students, they articulate it, they're clear about it. And then I would say that in terms of those students that I have that are the elite, they pinpoint, I think their biggest fear is immigration, is unchecked immigration, because they think that we may have to go through a period of austerity, but America's done it before and we can do it again. But they fear that there's a certain number at which it becomes impossible to reform. And they're concerned, rightly or wrongly, but I hear that a lot from my brightest students. They're concerned that we're just going to overwhelm the system and that we won't be able to overcome that.
Speaking of the demands of family, gentlemen, I apologize. I got to go attend to mine. It is time to start the great bedtime routine ritual. So I'm going into battle here.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. God bless you all, and God bless the United States.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I've talked about this on the show many times. So I'm Catholic, and one of the remarkable things to me in recent years is the Catholic Church in Oxford. If you go in the summertime, it's easy to get a seat because people are vacationing in the summertime and things like that. But the other reason is that students are gone. There are so many students at Mass every week that if you don't get there early, it's like you're going to stand along the walls. And that's not something that was true even 10 years ago. It's probably not something that was true, 5 or 6 years ago. There is a growing trend. I mean, I don't know. I have no way to verify these numbers, but somebody told me that we have more we have more students who are members of the sort of like Catholic student group at our church than like Ohio State has. And Ohio State is, you know, just much larger than we are, right? So they already have a numbers advantage. And it is remarkable. And you see this, and it's not just that they're there. Okay, like it's not just that they're there. You see them, and when you see them, you know, you have like women who are showing up with like the veil on their head and things like that, like college girls, right? Like you have people who are showing up like doing these things. This is not something that you saw in the past. And I think that what this speaks to is I think it speaks to the point that Scott's making, is that with younger people, there is this yearning for meaning. And what they are doing is, in search of that meaning, they are searching out the old things, the traditions. They're, you know, like they're going to the Catholic Church because that's the original Christian church, right? Like they're like, that's where they go. They're like, oh, well, I want to find meaning. Well, where did it start? Well, I guess I'll just start there. I'll go there and I'll see what that's about, right? I mean, I think that this is this is indicative of just what we're seeing, is that there is this desire. I mean, one of the weird things to me, being around college students, is the extent to which like modern college students really enjoy the 90s. Like they enjoy 90s culture. Like they enjoy streaming 90s television shows, right? They like when they see videos, you know, on the internet of just like people like, you know, I was in high school in the late 90s, and you know, occasionally somebody would have a camcorder, right? And they'd walk around, you know, campus with the camcorder, and they just record you, and you know, and people just, you know, give you funny faces and weird looks because it was a weird thing to do, right? Like it was sufficiently normal that you weren't like, what's happening, but it was a weird thing to do, you know, as a general principle. And so, but you got like genuine reactions of people. And I think that one of the things that that appeals to them is that when they see those videos, everybody is present in the moment, because you know what's missing from all of those videos is like nobody's looking at their phone.
Yep.
Because we didn't have them. Right. And I think that these are the kinds of things that I've noticed that are that I find, you know, interesting, right? That this you know, this move to the Catholic Church among young people, this like appreciation of sort of like 90s culture, right? Like this, there is this, there's this desire for something earlier, right? There's this desire that it's like they know that something is missing, and they're not quite sure what it is, and they're just searching for it, right? And they're trying, and I think the 90s is kind of like this iconic era where everything, you know,
80s
like,
were pretty cool too.
yeah. But I think the thing about the 90s was that, you know, the 80s, it was like America's ascendancy, right? Like it was like, you know, Ronald Reagan, you know, it's morning in America.
Yeah.
Things are on the upswing. Inflation is gone. The economy's growing. Taxes are lower. Like everybody's buying a house. Everybody, like things things are going well. But that was like ascendancy. Okay. Like in the 90s, it's sort of like victory, right? It's like we've reached victory, right? Like the Soviet Union is gone, right? This was our, you know, and now, like you used to hear politicians, like when I was a kid, I never knew what this meant, but when I was a kid, I would hear politicians all the time talk about the peace dividend, right? They would say like, oh, we're going to benefit from the peace dividend. And because there was this idea that like somehow, because the Soviets were gone, that sort of like, I mean, you had people, I mean, you see this, like you had like people like Francis Fukuyama, right? Talking about like the end of history, right? Like we have won, right? The only, you know, and I think that that's one reason that this kind of appeals, because that was everywhere in the culture. And not only that, but like our current culture is awful. Like art, movies, music, like the vast majority of it is just like utterly lacking. Like there were mediocre bands in the 90s, right? that had like popular followings that people still listen to today, right? And you look at like the mediocre bands of today, and you're like, I don't think no one's going to listen to this in like 1 year, right? Like this is like I'm surprised they're listening to it now. Yeah. And I think this is the problem, is like movies, television, all that stuff. I mean, even like one of the reasons they stream this stuff, like I saw this with my own children. My own children did not want to watch any of like the new shows. Like when streaming became a thing, they didn't watch any of like the new streaming stuff. Like even as small children, like my kids on streaming were watching shows like Full House and like Step by Step and these like these like TGIF shows, right, that were on in the 90s. And but the thing is it was immediately obvious to me why they were so attracted to these shows, because the shows that come out now, they're like shows for 8-year-olds, but they're like aimed at like an 18-year-old or something. Like they're not like the things that they talk about are not things that like an 8-year-old would talk about. They're not. There's this mismatch of sort of like what you should be providing to children. The reason they liked all of that stuff, the reason that they liked these shows that were popular back then, is there is a message in every show. Like every show, there's like, there's some argument, there's some disagreement, but at the end, there's like an important life lesson, right? I mean, we make fun of it now sometimes because it got to be cliche, but like, the last 5 minutes of the show, that nice gentle music would kind of start coming up in the background, right? And then like everybody starts talking in a little softer voice. And it's like, and the thing is, yeah, like for us, like growing up back then, like that stuff became very cliche and very, sort of, I mean, that's why we got sort of this turn towards shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and things like that, because it was a reaction to how sort of wholesome the culture had become. And like, so let's show like the grittier side of things. But like, there's a yearning for that. Like they want that stuff because like they're not getting it. They're craving this stuff that we used to have, that they no longer have, that now they have to go back in time to find those things that they really like and really appreciate and are really looking for, that speak to our values. And the culture is extremely important, and I've said this for a long time. The right has completely ceded the culture to the left, and you've seen what that's done. Like everything now is homogenous. Everything now is like must be in line with a particular thing. I mean, like you see this even in like academic publishing. Like I'm not going to say who it is. Brian will know exactly who I'm talking about. But I was asked to review a book. Okay, and I'm like reading the book, and like one of the things that the guy does in the book is, he's talking about the collapse of the Soviet Union, and when he's talking about the collapse of the Soviet Union, he's kind of talking about, well, some people thought the Soviet Union was going to rival the United States, and maybe, these would be the two big economic rivals, and the Soviet Union collapses. And then he says, like we forget about this now, but, kind of like there was this early stage of perestroika, right, where like they're really struggling. And then what he talks about is like the early years of Putin, how Putin came in and he brought on all of these technocrats and economists, and they created this like flat tax system, and they got rid of a bunch of they got rid of a bunch of regulations, and they got rid of a bunch of sort of tax loopholes and all of these things, and just made everything simpler. And he talks about how that grew the economy, but he goes through this whole thing, and then at the very end, he feels obligated to then be like, well, of course, like Putin is evil and bad, and we shouldn't have, we shouldn't say nice things. And it's like that's part of the culture that I'm talking about, is like people don't even feel like they have permission to say a nice thing about a policy that somebody once made because this person is an adversary. I think
yeah, look, what came to mind when you guys were talking earlier about the sort of like the delayed onset of adulthood. I think there's a cultural element. I also think there's a policy element that goes to this too, right? Which is, you think about, just one example comes to mind is the changes in how long children can stay on their parents' health care. Right? Like I don't know, maybe it's 26 now. I'm sure at some point it's going to be 40. But the point is that you have these sort of cultural elements, but then you also have these policies that essentially infantilize adults, and so they don't really ever end up having these sort of like growing. So when I think about my parents, my dad was 26 when I was born. And by that time, my dad had served in the Navy in Vietnam. He had come back. He had gotten a degree in electrical engineering from Kansas State, and then he and my mom had picked up and moved to California. They met in Kansas. I mean, so you have two sort of like Midwest Kansas kids that have never been outside of whatever. And at the time, California was the place where all the top talent was going for aerospace, which is what my dad works in, or I should say worked in, he's retired now. But you talk to, I think if you talk to a lot of, 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, aside from those, I should say, that have actually gone into the military. And the idea of at 18 joining the Navy, getting on an aircraft carrier, sailing to the South China Sea, being gone for months and months and months, and then coming back and going to college and getting married, and then going, to a whole new place and starting a whole new career. Most of them are like, no one, why would we do that? That's terrifying. It's scary. Like, what if it doesn't work out? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so by treating, I think by treating kids this way, one of the downsides is that they don't sort of get their sea legs, to, I guess, to borrow a metaphor from the Navy, they don't really get their sea legs underneath them until perhaps they've had more life experience. They don't really become, what you might consider a 22-year-old adult. I don't know, 20 years ago, they don't really achieve that same point until they're in their 30s and they've accumulated this life experience. But to me, that's sort of bizarre. In fact, I my wife convinced me that I should start working with a powerlifting trainer because she thinks that, perhaps I'm not lifting correctly and whatever. And actually, I hate to admit it, but she was right. And so the trainer has actually fixed a few things, which is good. And I'm getting older and I should get these things fixed. Otherwise, I don't hurt myself. But he and I were, my trainer and I, he's much younger than I am, but we were having a conversation and we were talking about the TV show Stranger Things. And actually, I think one of the reasons why Stranger Things, particularly early on, was so popular is that nostalgia, at least for me, right? Like, I think Josh and I are approximately around the same age-ish. That sort of thinking back to how things were in the late 80s and early 90s. And my trainer was sort of shocked at that degree of independence, that kids would just go like ride their bicycles, right? Like they, as long as you were home by dark, you were basically free to do whatever you want. And I was shocked by this because that was my childhood. I grew up in from the ages of 9 to 15, I was in rural New Hampshire. And so my parents' rule was like, you can go do whatever, like, just tell us what you're doing, but like, you're free to do whatever you want until it's dark, but you need to be home by it's dark. And yeah, it's like great as a kid, but the other thing you don't realize is that you're accumulating these sort of soft skills of responsibility and dealing with new situations on your own. You don't have your parents there, working things out with your friends, exploring, whatever. And there's a sense of maturity that I think comes very rapidly with that I think, kids that are on their phones all day or playing video games all day or whatever it happens to be, they never actually develop that. And so when I talk, sometimes, not always, but when there's many students that I interact with that are clearly adults, but maturity wise, they're much more like 15 or 16-year-olds rather than, let's say, like 18 or 19-year-olds. And it is, the show is about America's 250th. So I don't want to say that our best days behind us, because I don't think that they are. But it's funny to think about the 90s, because I graduated high school in 1999. And so in my mind, I think back to the 90s. I mean, this was peak America, right? Like, I'm graduating high school and I'm like, oh, I can't, the 21st century, it's all us, right? And then it's like, no, it's been a disaster. Right. So, like, my adult life, it's, it peaked when I was 18 and it's just been all downhill since there. But I think I think there's something about that sort of optimism of the 90s that I think can hopefully come back, because it really was a great time, actually. So hopefully that does resurface.
This is one of the things that gives me hope, because I actually think that, like, when I talk to students now, I think one of the things that gives me hope is I actually think that, like, our generation, like, and their generation, like, there's this natural sort of sympathy here, right? So, like, a lot of them are looking at the world and saying, I don't know if I'm actually going to have a better life than, like, my parents, right? And but I think that there's, like, some sympathy with our generation because, like you said, we graduate high school, and what do you have? You have it's September 11th, right? Then you have the global war on terror, right? The global war on an abstract noun, and the and so
we kicked that ass too.
and then and so you're spending all of this money. We accomplish nothing. It's incredibly unpopular, right? And and just as you think that, like, this is going as poorly as possible, then what do you have a financial crisis, right? And that financial crisis, oh, by the way, hits around the time that those people who had graduated high school, around the time that September 11th happened, like then the financial crisis happens, and it happens just in time for a lot of those people to be like in their first job or on the job market looking for their first job. And so their first experience was terrible. Right. And and then, the recovery was awful. Right. The recovery from, that's a thing that people don't talk about enough. Like the problem with the financial crisis wasn't so much like the financial crisis itself. Yes, that was painful and costly, but the problem is that we never really recovered. We never really fully recovered from that. And then, and then what do you have is, this is how you get the first Trump term, right? Because you've just lived through, you just lived through 15 years of chaos after you thought that the 21st century was like the American century, right? And
then you had an American president that in his second term went radically divisive.
Right.
And I always tell the people on the left who are upset about Trump, if you're really upset about Trump, you should be upset at yourself because you're the ones that did this. You created an environment where he could ascend. You ran a candidate that everyone hated. You knew everyone hated. And then he won an election.
Well, and if you think about it, think about what we just said. We just said that you lived through 15 years of just absolute crap, right? Like 15 years of just nonstop stuff happening to you. And then a guy comes along and he says, let's make America great again. Why was that so appealing? Well, because people remembered 15 years ago. That's why it was so appealing. Yes. People were like, yes, let's go back to that. That was fun. Right. And that's the thing is then you have, then you have the chaos of the first Trump administration. Then you have COVID. Then you have this colossal, disaster that was the Biden administration. Right. And it's just one thing after another. It's 2026. This was, September 11th was 25 years ago. That's what I said kicked off this whole thing. Like we are a quarter of a century into that period. It's not surprising that people are pessimistic, but I think that's where the sympathies between our generation and the current students lie, because they look at, and I think that's also why they're starting to project the problems onto baby boomers and things like that, because they look at us and they go, well, you know what? Your generation really didn't have it easy either. Like you lived this great life and you thought you had this thing available to you. And then look at all this crap that happened over the last 25 years. Like that had to suck. And so I think that's why that they're projecting it, further beyond, towards towards like the baby boomers and things like that, is because they see some sympathy with our generation, in a way that they don't with generations like prior to ours.
I do have a possible solution for some of this angst. And I know nothing will happen, which will create more angst, but Tulsi Gabbard on her final day released the proof that we all knew existed about Fauci and about COVID. And, we could lock some people up and hold some people accountable and do some things for what I think was a crime against humanity. We talk about young people. You guys work with young people. Young people were dramatically impacted by that. And now we know there's truth. Rand Paul's trying to bring Fauci in front of Senate, not to derail everything. And people get mad at me that I'm still mad about COVID. But
no, it's the most tyrannical thing that we've lived through, though. So you're allowed to be.
Yeah.
Well, and no one's been held accountable, right? There's no.
And it's worse than that, because when you try to hold them accountable, they're like, well, let's not like relitigate or whatever. It's like, well, I'm fine not relitigating if the people that did it admit that they were wrong and there's like some culpability, right?
And
but
Brian,
they're like, oh, no. Like,
I'm perfectly fine with relitigating. Let's
yeah.
Let's relitigate the hell out of it. Let's get real. Let's put it all out there and let's tell people that no, this was a conspiracy. Yeah. And I think all the things that happened didn't have to happen. You because there should be, and then I'll shut up, I promise. There should be a lesson that young people take forward where, hey, the next time someone, the government tries to pull this on you, you say, no, we're not shutting everything down. We're not going through the charade of it all. I'm trying to get back into running. I'm running on a treadmill so that I don't tear something up on the streets, and I'm running on the treadmill and I'm like finding something to watch, right? And NFL Network was showing old games Like old classic games is how they portrayed it. And I'm like, that sounds as good as anything. And I pull it up, and it's a game from like 2021. And you forget like how crazy that was. All the coaches have masks on. The officials have masks on. The crowd's like a quarter full. It's in Nashville, Tennessee. It's insanity when you go back and look at it. And yes, I do honestly believe it's a path forward is to go back, relitigate that, and hold people accountable. So.
Well, and I think to Josh's point, I've said this to my students before. When I was their age, my sort of sense is that America could do anything. But if you think about it from their perspective, right, you have the three, am I thinking about, three like sort of largest government failures of like the post World War II era, right? So there's of course the global war on terror, right? Turns into a giant boondoggle. The financial crisis and the recovery. Or lack thereof, and then COVID. And so so that the idea that there's something exceptional about the United States, I think, if I had not been born when I was, I think it would be a lot less clear to me than it was because I was fortunate enough to be born in 1981. But if you're a young person now and you look at it, you're like, well, what's so great here, right? The last 25 years have been a disaster of pretty major proportions. And I think to go back to the point too with the because Neal, I agree 100%. My friends get sort of shocked when I say this, but my view is that Barack Obama was the worst president of my lifetime, and it's not even close. And I think for several reasons, but one is, and this is more of like a technical monetary economics point that I think Josh will appreciate, but that sort of brings forward a more policy relevant point. The real reason that we want to avoid collapses in nominal spending is not that the collapses are themselves costly, which they are, but there's some evidence that suggests that the way in which voters respond to these collapses in nominal spending is they respond to politicians who come along and say, oh, well, I'm going to fix it with this, this, and this. But it turns out that their proposed fixes are only going to make things like much, much worse. So we end up getting this sort of horrible negative spending shock that gets met with a policy shock. FDR did this. FDR, he sees, prices are falling. Let's make it illegal for prices to fall by enacting wage and price controls. It's like, well, yeah, you stop prices from falling by restricting output, right? Like you took a bad situation, you make it worse. The Obama administration did the exact same thing. And so there's actually a great book on this, Redistribution Recession by Casey Mulligan. You have all of these labor market policies that get put into effect that basically are like, let's have nobody work and whatever. So what ends up happening when you've got essentially like a decade of slow to no growth, it takes forever for the labor market to recover, for people to get back in. People rightly get pessimistic about capitalism. They get rightly pessimistic about the growth prospects of the future of the country. They get deeply cynical about how any of this stuff can work. And I think COVID is a great example of this too, which is that no one's going to be, in their mind, no one's going to be held accountable. You can make these massive mistakes that cost trillions of dollars, not to mention hundreds of thousands of lives, and no one is held accountable for these sorts of things. And so it's easy for people, particularly young people, to be like, yeah, the world sucks. I see no evidence to the contrary. And I just happen to be lucky enough that I'm like, well, I remember when it didn't suck. Like I remember, when we got cell phones, right? And like no more dial-up internet. I mean, this was incredible. And so I will say, and Josh knows this because we've chatted about this privately. My hope is that maybe with the AI, like that's another sort of technology that can make people very optimistic. I'm very, very much an AI optimist. I've had a lot of fun with it. It's the most excited I've been about a technology in a really long time. So maybe that's sort of the sort of thing that can sort of shock us out of our doldrums and to be more forward looking and think about what can be rather than just merely complaining about what once was.
No, I think that's the problem. I think you hit on it, is that the problem is accountability. I think that, in fact, like everything that I see in my life, like even just like problems at the university, anytime there's a problem at the university, it's always a problem of accountability. It's always an issue that like nobody was held accountable for a mistake. And so the mistake just got worse. And what started out as like a small mistake turned into a big mistake. And now we're all talking about it and we have to have meetings about it. And it's like, well, we could have avoided all of these meetings if you would have just punished the person who made the mistake in the first place. But we don't hold people accountable. And I think on a grand scale, I mean, that's what it is. The financial crisis, nobody was held accountable. You had all of these banks who were taking, tons of risk. And, and then you had all of these, you had all these central bank lending facilities. You had all of these fiscal programs to then try to make these banks whole after they had made these really risky bets and lost. Right. And people look at that and they go, okay, well, so there's just no accountability then. Right. So like nothing happens to you. Like and it's the same thing with, it's the same thing when you look at COVID, right? There's no accountability anywhere. There's no, nobody, we do this thing where we're just like, people were doing their best. And it's like, no, they weren't doing their best. Like Neal and I were having conversations. This podcast didn't exist, but we were having other conversations on other podcasts about this very thing. Is I remember very early on in the pandemic saying schools should be open. Like there's tons of data out there that show that like kids are not getting sick and schools should be open. And I can't tell you how much hate mail that I would get from people. And the thing is I was not sympathetic whatsoever. Okay. Do you like my wife was working as an oncology nurse at the time. You know who didn't get off for COVID? Oncology nurses. You know why? Because people were still dying of cancer. So she was going to work every single day, and I would have these people email me and be like, "Who are you? Who are you? You shouldn't ask my like kindergarten teacher wife to go teach." And I'm like, "Why? Like my wife is at work. Like what is that? Like how is that? Like what is the decision calculus that's going on here, right? Like what are you basing this on? Like we have no evidence that kids were getting sick and they didn't do it. When the university had the opportunity to teach in person, they gave us the option, right? Like that first year, it was like, it's optional. If you want to teach in person, you can teach in person. Well, I signed up to teach in person, and I'll tell you, I still have thank you notes from students for showing up and teaching in person because they were so fed up with everything going online. And if you think those people aren't still angry about how they were treated, like I actually have this argument all the time where I don't know who actually has things worse, because the students that I had back then, like they're rightfully angry because this was this destroyed part of their life, a part of their life that's supposed to be like, enjoyable and happy. And it was destroyed and nobody was held accountable. And I feel bad for them because they know it. But I sometimes wonder, like, who do I feel worse for? Do I feel worse for them, or do I feel worse for my current students? Because my current students, I'm not even sure that they realize how poorly that they were treated. Like if you think of an incoming freshman, right now, they were 12 or maybe even 11 in 2020. Like for them, this wasn't all that weird, right? Like this was just, if you're 11 or 12 years old, like this is just kind of a thing and everybody's doing the thing and you don't think that much about it because you're 11 or 12 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And now you've gotten here. And I think the reason I think about that so much is there are a lot of college students who are coming in and they're not prepared, and it's not their fault that they're not prepared. They're not prepared because there are schools around this country, again, because of a lack of accountability, who did not teach the students properly in those years, and even subsequent to those years when they were still taking all of these precautions. And those students show up and they think they're prepared. And the reason they think they're prepared is that when they relaxed the standards and when they made people less accountable, they didn't give those students C's because they only covered half the stuff they were supposed to cover. They gave them A's. And they gave them A's because why? Because that kept their parents happy. Right?
Well, if you make straight A's without studying, you've got to feel like you're prepared.
Exactly.
Right?
And so you show up thinking like, oh, school is easy. Like I've done well my entire life. And then you get there. And I know this firsthand because as department chair, people come to me when they have a complaint. If they have a complaint about their professor, they come directly to me and they sit in my office. And look, sometimes you get legitimate complaints, but a lot of the complaints that I'm getting are things where they're like, my professor wants me to do X. Like, isn't that ridiculous? And I'm like, no, that's like what we've expected, like from the beginning of time. Like, I don't like, you must have something more specific in mind. And I feel bad because I don't want to be mean because I know that they don't know better. They're not trying to get something over on me, right? Like if this was 10 years ago, I would assume that this person is just trying to like see what they can get away with, right? No, I don't assume that now. Now I'm kind of like, oh, they don't know better. Like this is bad because like I'm going to have to be the person who explains to them that they haven't been held to this standard, but that this is the normal standard. And we robbed people of that. And I think that, but it's all about accountability. It's accountability across the board. Every single one of these crises that we've talked about, it's a lack of accountability that's made things worse. We've just patched holes and problems and then moved on. And you can't do that. At a certain point, it's like the Donald Duck cartoon or whatever, where he's in the boat and there's a hole in the boat and he put, and he, fills that hole and then another one opens and then he fills that hole and then another one opens. Eventually you're going to run out of appendages to stick in there, right? Like this is not going to, like you can't keep patching over your problems. Like there is an actual life lesson from Donald Duck, right? Like is that you can't just pass over, you can't patch over these problems and expect things to get better. Like you have to hold people accountable. There have to be consequences when people do things wrong. And if you don't do that, you get a society where, like, to tie this back into our original point, where people in New York go, screw it. Let's just throw out the system entirely. If this is the system, I don't want it. Right? Like, let's just start over. Like, at least this guy's promising me, like, nirvana, right? So
utopia.
Yeah.
Let's just take the money from the rich and give it to the poor, and that'll solve everything.
It's funny on the accountability thing. My students know that I hate the passive voice in writing, and the example I always give, and of course it's very popular with bureaucrats, is the phrase "mistakes were made." And of course the answer is by whom? Mistakes don't make themselves. And so like that sort of like bureaucratic speak is essentially a way to sort of avoid having anybody take responsibility. Or choices were made by whom? Choices don't make themselves. Somebody made a choice. The first day of class, I give a lecture. I used to like want to jump right into the content, and I realized I can't do that anymore for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that I mentioned to the students, and this is exactly to Josh's point, I start off by saying, look, I'm sorry that the adults in your life have failed you, because they have. But the only choice in front of you now is to resent them and continue to not be prepared for adulthood, or to realize that you were robbed of what you probably should have learned when you were younger, and to fill in those gaps now. And I assure you, it's going to be easier to fill in those gaps now than waiting 2 years or 4 years or 6 years or whatever. But the problem is that for these kids, nobody wants to stand up and basically have to be the bad guy. And of course, no one likes being the bad guy. Like I actually don't take pleasure in failing my students. It breaks my heart to do it. I know how hard it's going to be on them. But if I'm not going to put my foot down, then like who, right? Like where does this stop? So at some point you have to hold people accountable. And of course, if your whole life up to that point you've never been held accountable, whether it's by your parents, so the parents are saying, oh well, you're not the problem, it's society that's the problem. You're not the problem, it's the teacher that's the problem, or whatever. Or the teachers are like, oh no, like this is probably a little off topic, but this is like a hobby horse of mine of like different learning styles. It's like I don't know if we're censored here. That's BS, right?
You're
like
good.
that's
No, you're
just
you're
like
good.
yeah, it's bullshit, right?
MPW
Like it's just
Digital's
bullshit.
heard a lot worse than BS. Let me
Yeah.
tell you.
So like it's just pure cope.
I've
right?
had
It's like,
moments
oh,
that
like
were,
I I don't know, I don't know why, I don't know why y equals mx plus b, because like that's not my learning styles. No, you don't learn it because you're lazy. Like it has nothing to do with learning styles. Like so, I this is very frustrating, because then of course we end up having to be the bad guys if you're going to have any standards whatsoever, and say like, no, that's not how this is going to work. You're going to actually have to show up and do the work, whether that's like I'm not very popular for one reason, which is that I don't do online exams. And I was doing online exams until a student went on to rate my professor and basically was like, Cutsinger's great. He used his lockdown browser, but it's really easy to hold up your phone with an app, with an AI app, and it will just scan the multiple choice exam and tell you exactly all the right answers. And so I show the students at the first day of class, I'm like, I have no idea who this person is, but sorry. So now, like, we're in person, right? I have in-person written exams, and again, this is just not how other faculty do things for a variety of reasons. But I think, and again, going back to my earlier comment with AI, I think we as professors are going to have to find new ways of holding our students accountable so that they actually learn the material that that we're supposed to be teaching them, which is why now it's like, look, we're going to move everything. In my class anyway, we're moving everything back into the classroom, and I'm going to hold you accountable. And you're not going to just be able to float through college, at least not my class, by using AI to not ever have to think or or whatever. So, again, I agree. Accountability, 100%. Accountability for our elected officials, accountability for our students. And again, the challenge there is that makes us like super unpopular, right? Because they've never had to deal with that probably up to this point, but most of the other faculty members don't do this.
Scott?
Yes, I disappeared for a while because, namely, my computer died. And I was loving the conversation. I was like, I'm going to try to get back on there.
That happens.
So
It's I've had we've had live streams where the computer just died in the middle of it. And I'm like, well, that's not good, but that's part of it. I mean, it's like to Brian's point, that's part of failure.
I watched it. I watched it counting down, and I was like, well, I'm not fast enough to run, grab the cord, and come back and them not notice. That's cartoon. I don't have that cartoon speed. So I just hoped that maybe we would wind down, and then I was like, oh no.
But Brian, like to your point, I mean about and Brian might have, there he's back.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I clicked the button, and I don't know what just happened there. Sorry, but I am here, and I just checked. Scott got me worried. My laptop has a fair amount of power. I think I'm in good shape.
But I mean,
for the time being.
Josh and I.
Well, that's what's fun about this show is that people appear and disappear, but it remains base, as Josh would say. No matter who appears or disappears.
But what I was going to say is, we've created this. It's why I'm very sympathetic to young people because we've created this society like with youth sports, right? Where everybody makes, as long as, mommy and daddy can pay for it, you make the select whatever team and you travel around and you play in the whatever super invitational tournament. And even when your team finishes 4th out of 6th, you get trophies or medals or whatnot. And it doesn't have to be that way. Look, you're not fooling the kids. The kids know it's stupid. Yet it's this subtle thing of, well, no one loses. And then you watch the NBA Finals, and only one team gets the trophy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean, look, I hate the Spurs, and I think they suck because I hate them, but they're really good. But they didn't win. The Knicks won. And so if you're the Spurs, right, the lesson of this is it's a life lesson. We all remember this from high school. When you played a game on Friday night, you came back on Saturday or Sunday or whatever, and you watched the film and your coaches yelled at you. And then after that was over, you corrected your mistakes and you tried to be better the next week. The failure was there. It's on the film. It's unavoidable. You have to learn from it. And failure ends up being good. You end up correcting that mistake, and the next week you make the play that you didn't make the week before. The Spurs are going to evaluate what happened in that series. Hey, where did we go wrong? What did we not have? What do we have to do? Is it just simply maturing? Is it simply growing up? Is it simply getting experience? Or do we need another presence near Wembanyama at the rim? Do we have to take some things away from him? Do we have the decision to make on De'Aaron Fox, right? You have to make all these decisions, and you come back and you try again. That's the beauty of it. And then when you win, and I think eventually – I hate to admit this, eventually they're probably going to win a title. When they do, it's going to mean more to them in that moment because of the failure. I mean, we do the Michael Jordan thing, right? He was the greatest of all time. Well, the Bulls didn't win the first time Michael Jordan went to the playoffs. The Celtics beat them. Larry Bird and then the Celtics beat them. And then the Pistons beat them after the Pistons finally knocked off the Celtics. The Bulls had to go through all those growing pains. And when they won, it was more special. It was more meaningful. They had earned it. No one disputed that the Bulls had not earned the titles in the 90s. I mean, that there's a life lesson to that I think we, for whatever reason, wanted to take away from young people. And it's like, no, that's part of it. Failure's not the end of the world. Most of us are going to fail at some point in something, and you learn from that failure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people
I make
talk
this point
about.
With please, Scott, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was just gonna say that people talk about the problems that we have with uncontrolled immigration, and that's a serious problem. And the economy and people not being able to buy homes and all of this stuff. But we're now talking about another dimension to this, and that is permissive parenting. Does permissive parenting create an individual that can thrive or even would want to be in the kind of country that we are. Because what permissive parenting creates is an individual that believes that they are do what they want when they want it, and that any impediment to getting anything is unfair, and therefore immoral, and someone should do something about it. And I hate that we've struck yet another problem that we have. But the thing to notice about this is not economics. This is not politics. This is human psychology, and this is about parenting, and raising people who simply are not equipped not only to participate in a constitutional republic but to want one, because they don't value any of the things that you talk about. In my class, one of the things that I try to talk about is, because humans are humans. So when I tell you, okay, sure, everybody likes to go and get a Big Mac, whatever your favorite fast food is, and there is a pleasure to that, and we shouldn't deny that there are transient pleasures, and that they make life better sometimes. However, I've never had a single student who would defend the proposition that the satisfaction that a marathon runner feels upon completing a marathon is morally equivalent, or in any way equivalent, even in terms of pure satisfaction, to eating a Big Mac at McDonald's. Not a single taker on that argument, because it is ridiculous. But permissive parenting raises people to expect that the very most precious things that we can have in life should be had immediately and for free.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Look,
a parent. So I see it. I mean, you love your kids, you want them, but you realize, like, I am really hurting my kid, I am making it so that they're going to have a very difficult time being happy in this world.
My students get tired of me using these examples because I just relate everything back to the weight room. But I think it's exactly that, right? Which is that there are days, in fact, it's most days, where, like, I just don't want to lift weights. I just don't. I know it's gonna, like, and I've gotten older. Like, my shoulders all messed up, and just the thought
Amen.
of, like, getting under the bar, I'm like, oh my God, But the point is, right, is that there's the sense of accomplishment that comes from setting a goal for yourself, putting in the work to do it, showing up on the days that you don't want to do it, and whatever. I mean, there's nothing quite like it. And this comes from somebody who, like, I didn't play sports when I was younger, but wish I would have. I was, like, more of a band nerd. And it was later in life that I got much more into being, like, physically active and all this, that, and the other. And having, like, lived both sides of that coin, I can tell you that I much prefer this. That the
Mhm.
the Look, I eat things from time to time I know I shouldn't eat, and drink things from time to time I know I shouldn't drink. I smoked a cigar yesterday in the middle of the day. It's the summer and I'm an academic, so I'm like, nah, whatever. So, but nonetheless, like, there's something that comes from that sense of accomplishment. And again, I think, if you think about in the context of learning, it's the same thing. I think that what ends up happening with students and young people in particular is that we've sort of, like, lied to them that learning should be fun. And, well, no, right? Like, maybe in some deep sense, learning is fun in the same way that challenging yourself in the weight room is fun, but the actual act of bench pressing is miserable. It sucks. Or squatting or deadlifting or whatever. And so, I think thinking of, teaching people, and I'm going to relate this back to our America 250 thing, teaching people to appreciate the grind and to be willing to defer the joys of present consumption in exchange for something even greater in the future. I think not only is that an important part of living a thriving and healthy life, it also has to be part of being part of a thriving and healthy society. I saw a quote recently from Joseph Schumpeter. I'm gonna butcher it, but because he was a great writer, and I can never remember the exact ways he puts things. But it was basically like, you can determine how depraved a society is by how high their interest rates are, because high interest rate societies are societies that are impatient and they don't put off present comforts, or or whatever. And so I think, again, when you raise people or tell people that things should just be good immediately, you shouldn't have to put in any work, things are just going to be good, and if they're not good, like, you should just do something else, or you should give up or whatever, you're going to be miserable as a person. And culturally, if that becomes the prevalent way of the way people live their lives, I don't understand how you think that it would then even be possible to sustain a country that requires constant work. Because, and on top of it, like, a lot of the work you're going to put in, you yourself might not even reap the benefits, right? It's going to be for your children or your grandchildren, or maybe it's going to be for people that you don't even know. Like, there were people that, there were men that died on Omaha Beach that made my life possible today. Like, they, they didn't know about me. And I don't even know that they were doing it because of, they know they weren't doing it because of me. But my point is that if people are not willing to put off, present consumption for something that's even bigger and better in the future, I think it's gonna be very hard to sustain. And this goes back to my earlier points about gratitude, which is that it seems to me culturally we're just sort of interested in consuming our intellectual, our spiritual, and our material capital, rather than trying to continue to build it up and expand it beyond what it currently is, or what it currently was when we were born.
And Scott,
Brian, if I understand you right, to continue the weight room, or stay in the weight room, you're saying that if America is going to survive and flourish, we have to go back to loving leg day.
Yes,
we have to be the kind of people who love leg day.
I mean, actually, it's funny for me personally. Like, I really don't like squatting, but I love deadlifting. I actually really love deadlifting. But yes, I agree. That's right. Like, it's like, look, self-governance is difficult and it's really annoying. And I'm only human. I'm guilty of this too, right? Like, what happens when you see in the mail that the jury duty thing is coming? Most people are like, oh my God, like, what? Immediately I'm like one of my students. I'm like, all right, I've got to come up with every plausible excuse to get out of doing this sort of thing, right? But like, doing that sort of stuff is what makes the country work, right? It's like the work of everyday people that they're just like, well, it's what I need to do, so I'm gonna do it. If the attitude is like, I should never have to do anything to sustain my country, I don't understand, or I don't think we're going to be able to have a country for very long.
Well, your marathon example is actually a really good one. The actual running of marathon, when you go run the Chicago Marathon on a Sunday morning, it's awesome. There's people lining the streets the whole way. They're cheering for you. You've got different, you'll go through different parts of the city, and they're having like festivals basically, and people have funny signs. At the 13-mile mark, you'll see the sign that goes, hurry up, the Kenyans are drinking your beer, stuff like that, and you laugh, and it's fun. But here's the part that's not fun. Like that 16-mile training run that you do on a random Sunday, and then the next Sunday you have to do a 17-mile training run. Those are not fun. You're by yourself. No one's cheering for you. You're off. But when the day that you run the race, it's full of people who've done that. 99-point-something% of the people had to train for that day, right? And that's where the accomplishment is. The accomplishment was in the work. It's why when you look at the end of the finish line of a marathon, you see happy people. Well, they're not happy because they finished 2,782nd. They're happy because they're happy because they trained for this thing and they did it, and nobody else could do the work for them. They had to do it. They had to do the training. And like Brian, you don't just go in and deadlift 600 pounds. You've got to work your way up to that. And so when you get that done, you did it. You did it. Maybe there were some people that trained you, that helped you, but they cannot do the work for you. And that's to me, that's kind of part of that whole deal. It's what made the country great, really, is you had generations of people that put work in, and they they just went to work. They had leg day. They had the 16-mile training run. They just did it, and they were building for something. And when they accomplished it, there was this great sense of personal and collective accomplishment that I think that's what separates our country in some ways, is that attitude that I think was pervasive for so long.
Well, I think that's the other thing too, is there's a saying that the sign of a healthy society is when old men plant trees where they'll never enjoy the shade. Right? Is that they're not planning it for themselves, right? This is not for them, right? But that's the thing, is that you're forward looking, that you're thinking about the people who will come after you, and you're trying to create a better world for those people. And I think that is, I mean, to Brian's point, like what this is that we have to be a low time preference society. We have to be a society that is willing to to wait for benefits, right? Like everything worth having required work. Like the things that you value when you look back on your life, you value the things that required hard work. You value the things where like you had to put in a lot and it took you a long time, and then you finally accomplished the thing, right? Like it's not the easy stuff. You don't think back on the easy stuff and think, oh wow, that was great. No, it's fleeting. And I mean, it's a thing that we talk about on here all the time, is that, and Scott brought this up earlier, but it's the thing about your priorities and where you place your priorities. I mean, it was a huge, I mean, I remember distinctly like realizing this at a certain point, because, I grew up in this idea of like, oh yeah, you should delay these things. No, I did none of that stuff. I got married early. I had, I more than replacement children. Okay. So like, but I didn't follow the advice, but I heard the advice, right, growing up about, oh, put your career first, do this first, and then, do this and then do that. And I think that but the thing that I realized is that, for a long time, I was very, very focused on things like professional success, right? And that was like, and I found that was like driving me in a lot of ways. But I started to have this realization, and the realization that I was starting to have was that, those professional successes were, they were great, and sometimes brought me a lot of happiness. But the happiness that they brought was temporary, right? Sometimes it brought me happiness for a day. Sometimes it brought me happiness for a week. Sometimes it brought me happiness for a month. Sometimes it even brought happiness for maybe even as long as a year. But that's the thing, is that like those professional successes were never the things that I, that was never the thing that I, that brought me happiness. And not only that, but every professional success made you want this additional professional success. It made you want to like, just move on to the next thing. Like, okay, I've now satisfied that goal. Let's move on to the next thing. And what you start to realize is that actually the things that bring you meaning, are not those professional things. Those professional things can bring you some meaning. Okay, but they're not going to make you whole. There's always going to be something missing if that's all you have is the professional success, because you have to have these, you have to have some greater purpose that gives you meaning. You can't just rely on those successes. And I think too, when I look around academia and I look around, I mean, I'm not, I don't know about other fields, but when I look around, the economics, discipline, like, I don't know, Brian can correct me if he thinks I'm wrong here, but like, I see a lot of miserable people, quite frankly. Like I see people who are just constantly, just on the hamster wheel, just miserable. Because, and that's the thing is like, okay, some of them you can understand, they haven't had the professional success that they thought they were going to have or something like that. That's completely understandable. But you see even like really successful people who feel the exact same way as those other people. And what you realize is like, this is their career. Like their career is everything to them. And it's not providing them with the sense of meaning that they're looking for, but they think that like the next professional success is going to give them that meaning, and they're chasing a ghost. Like it's never going to come. That professional success is never going to get them, what they need. I mean, I don't know how true these stories are, but like there have been economists, right? Prominent economists, very successful economists who have committed suicide. And the rumors around their suicide is that they realized like they were not going to get a Nobel Prize. Like these are people like the top 1% of their field. And like, I'm sorry, but like that is a sign that you put way too much on your career if that's what's leading you to suicide. Like, you should have something about your life that's providing you with meaning beyond that, because, okay, I'm sorry, but like, not very many people get the Nobel Prize. Like, this is not a reasonable goal, right? Like, some of it's entirely random. There are great economists who lived and died who should have got Nobel Prizes that didn't, right? Like and so, yeah, you have to find that thing, and we have to be a low time preference society. We have to be people who are willing to make sacrifices for future generations. We have to be people who are going to do the right thing. We have to be people. But I guess what, like, the big theme of what all we're describing is first of all, we need to get to a society, okay, in all of our lifetimes, okay, we've moved from a society that emphasizes values, right? Like, what everybody talks about is like our values, right? What are your values, and do we share values? This is wrong. Like, this is wrong. What we should be focused on are virtues. Like, we want a virtuous people. We want people who are focused on being virtuous. That's what we really want. We want virtues, not values. Like, and because virtues are timeless, right? Virtues are timeless. Like, they apply at any time in human history. They're not unique to a particular place and time. Values are always unique to a particular place and time. That's why we spend so much time arguing about, was Thomas Jefferson a good person? Because we apply like values that we have today, and we say, oh, well, would that be good? Would that be bad? But what we should be focused on is we should be focused on virtues, right? The values come and go. Values evolve over time. Virtues are the same, right? Courage is always courage, right? Like, the idea that somehow, like, we need to focus on values is in the wrong place. We need to get to a place where we care about virtues, because virtue is what all of this stuff that we have in common is about. It's about delaying gratification, right? It's about doing the right thing in the right situation. It's about being bold and standing up for what's right? Even if it's at great personal cost to you, right? It's about doing those kinds of things. That's what we need to get back to. That's what ties all of this together, is about having a virtuous public. And that's something that we can do if we foster that in our children. That's something that we can do in our daily lives by just being conscious of, like, am I being a virtuous person, right? Like, these are things that everyone can do, that everyone can teach, and that actually solve a lot of the problems that we're talking about.
Anybody got any closing thoughts as we wrap this up?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys as we close, like, because we've sort of gone back and forth from talking about how great the United States is, and then like spending the next 50 minutes talking about what's wrong, and then coming back, well, it's great, and then spending the next 45 minutes talking about what's wrong. So I think the best way to end it is, what gives you hope?
Okay, so mine is kind of a funny example, but I think there's actually something very charming and deeply truthful about it. I am obsessed, my wife is too, with all the Europeans that are visiting the US for the World Cup, and their minds are blown. Like that Freddie guy, whoever the heck he is, like, I'm so happy. Like, he's just having like this like once in a lifetime trip, and they're coming here and they're seeing like just how great the US is. And I think, Neal, you made this point earlier, and I was going to bring it up, that one of the things that the Europeans I've seen many of them comment on, is that one of the distinctly American characteristics is this sort of attitude of, I'm going to, like, if something needs to get done, like, I will find a way to get it done. Like, I'll just do it. Right. Like, that's, there's this great quote at the Epcot Center from, she can be a polarizing figure, but it's a great quote nonetheless, from Ayn Rand on, the question isn't who will let me, the question is who's going to stop me. And I think there's something still among Americans that have this sort of attitude of like, yes, the world we want to live in is possible. We can make it. We will do it. We like that can happen. And I think you go to other places, you go to other countries, and you talk to the people there, and there's sort of a quiet resignation that there's nothing that can be done, and you just have to sort of go with the flow and whatever. And it seems to me that despite our problems, there's that attitude that is distinctly American is still very very alive and well in parts of the country, probably particularly the Sun Belt and the South. And I think as long as that's there, there's a chance for us to make this century actually a pretty good one.
I'll piggyback off that and be very, very short. I completely agree with you. I was telling Josh at the beginning of the show, I was watching Cubs Mets today, and which country is
Norwegian.
it? Norwegian. Norway, I guess, is playing in New York, and they were at the Cubs Mets game, and they're just having a blast. And they're cheering out in right field. They don't really know what they're cheering for, but they're just having a blast. And all the people that were from the Dutch, the Netherlands were playing in Houston, and they're going to all the different Tex-Mex places, and they're just falling in love with white queso. You know, I mean, and I read a column Peggy Noonan wrote the other day about Rocky and how it's as hokey as that movie is. You know, the first Rocky, 1976. It was kind of made with the spirit of the 200th birthday of our country. You know, and Apollo Creed was sort of a playoff of Muhammad Ali. You know, a great showman, the champion of the world. And, you know, he has this marketing idea to, you know, give just somebody an opportunity, because America's a land of opportunity. He's going to give some chump an opportunity to fight. And you know what? I'll do it in his hometown, and that hometown will just happen to be Philadelphia. And, you know, Rocky Balboa, this hardworking son of Italian immigrants, you know, married to this mouse of a woman, you know, Adrian, and you know, all this stuff. And Rocky, you know, his goal wasn't really to win. His goal was to finish the fight. And he did. You know, it was this great, and you go back in the movie, it was a low budget movie, and it won Academy Awards, and Sylvester Stallone wrote it, and everyone said no. Put another actor in, and he's like, no, I am Rocky Balboa. This is my story too. And I don't know. I still think that part of America continues to resonate 50 years later. There's a reason that we watch those Rocky movies. Rocky IV, as hokey as it is, when Rocky's in Russia and he's training to avenge Apollo's death against Ivan Drago, and we're all just in it, you know. And like our soccer team this year, we're not going to win the World Cup. The U.S. isn't winning the World Cup, but we're better than we were 4 years ago. We're better than we were 8 years ago. There's been a lot of work that's gone into the U.S. soccer program, and you're starting to see some of the rewards from that. There are some players who, because they have dual citizenship, could play for other countries that actually have a chance to win the World Cup, but they're playing for the U.S. because it means something to them. I have hope, because I think there's signs of hope everywhere. We just have to embrace them. Sometimes you have to ignore some of the negative and look at the positive, and we're still a great country because we know we are.
Scott, what gives you
I would just say that, first of all, if you my dogs are unfortunately engaging in massive acts of dumbassery, and so they may provide some firework barks, which maybe I can say something that's worthy of their annoying attention. I think that when you imagine a historian writing about the country that was the United States of America, you can't imagine it going any other way than an acknowledgement that a rare and precious and unique thing in human history happened, and then it went away. And then we just went back to the way people had always done it. And if such a history would even be allowed to be written, but that would be the honest sentiment of anyone looking back on this period. And so, and on the inspiring side of the ledger, I would just say that we have one huge advantage, and that is that our message is true and it's inspiring. So either human beings are as characterized by our founders, and therefore the government that we have is ideally suited for human nature, or there is another understanding of human nature that is more accurate, and therefore we would expect another form of government to fit with that understanding of human nature. But if the Judeo-Christian understanding of human nature is correct, then we have it figured out. And the founders' understanding of human nature, that Judeo-Christian understanding of human nature, is a very exalted one. So we've been talking about how we expect a lot of other human beings. There is no higher form of praise or love than to expect your fellow human beings to be able to accomplish, to do, to be responsible, to take care of themselves. But the left doesn't get the compassion game either, because we also have a responsibility to take care of each other, but in ways that fortify our dignity. So I think it comes down to the definition of human nature. I think we have the right one. Unfortunately, we have had eons of human beings being suppressed, that their dignity, their human nature can be suppressed. But we do have the truth on our side, and everything that we've been talking about since I reappeared is very inspiring. You know, I mean, I compare it to victimhood and grievance. It's very inspiring. When I talk to young people in the way that we've been talking, you see it in their eyes. They get excited. Why? Because it's saying, I think you're capable of something. And most people respond to that.
I don't know if this quote is actually accurate or not. Brian will tell me if it is. Churchill at one point said, you know, the Americans always do the right thing after exhausting all other options. And I think that's the way to think about it. Like, whenever I'm feeling pessimistic, I think about all of the things that have happened in the United States and what people must have been thinking going through those times. You know, and when they're, you know, I grew up, I was very lucky. I had a grandfather who told me stories that he really didn't tell anybody else. He talked to me about experiences in warfare. He talked to me about what it was like to grow up during the Great Depression. And as depressing as some of those stories are, they were also simultaneously inspiring. Because when you put yourself in that position and you imagine yourself as a boy growing up in the Depression and going down to the local grocery store to pick up a ham, and that ham is going to last you all week because you're going to have ham on Sunday, and then you're going to have soup, and then you're going to have all that, you know, like, you're just, that ham is what you have for the week. That's what you have. And you listen to these stories and you think about how hopeless things must have seemed. You think about those times. You think about all of these things that the United States has gone through. You think about all of these periods where we've gone through these struggles. We seem to figure it out. And look, there's always things to complain about. You know, we can talk about how when we came through certain things, maybe there was permanent changes that today we don't like, or that we wish wouldn't have happened, or something like that. You know, like, you know, I'm thinking in particular, like, you know, lots of people on the right are sort of like, yeah, we got through World War II, but, you know, we got stuck with like the New Deal and all of this, like, you know, big government that lasted, you know, to this day and things like that. But my point is that we survived, right? We survived to another day. And I think the thing that gives me hope is that as long as that flame is burning, right? As long as as there are people in the United States who think about the United States in ways that we've described today, right? That think about the United States as that shining city on a hill. When they think about, which is also, by the way, that this is a religious reference. I know Alex isn't here, but he would make that point. You know, the shining city on a hill, like that view of America, that view that this is the best place to be, that there is no other place to go to, that this is where you want to be, that this is unique in human history, that we are living in a society unimaginable prior to the founding of this country, that there are people out there who are motivated by that, who believe in that, who share that ideal, who look to that and take great pride in it. Right. And you think about how many people there are out there, as long as that flame is burning, and as long as there are people out there who have that appreciation, who yearn for that, who want America to be great, who want America to be what it once was and better, right? Who want to see this grand social experiment actually not only survive, but thrive. As long as that exists, I am confident that at some point, right, like we will actually solve these problems. We will actually rise up to the challenge and solve these big societal problems, and we will do the right thing, because that is what America is built on. And if not us, then who? Somebody's got to do it. And the thing is that, you know, the work starts now, and I'm hoping that there are lots of people out there, but as long as that flame burns, like I'm confident that we'll get through this and that, you know, we'll come out better on the other side.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. You guys gave us a lot of time tonight, probably more than you planned to originally, and we are incredibly appreciative of.
Happy to do it.
Hope you have a great 4th of July. Hope your families do as well. And thanks to Alex earlier, to Scott, to Brian, for Josh. I'm Neal McCready. That does it for this special edition of the Josh Hendrickson Show. We'll be back sometime after the 4th. And we'll get another show to you. But enjoy the holiday, and we will see you on the other side. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.